Chapter 35-26. 1 month, 3 months, a year and a half. He tried to persuade them with reason and emotion. Listen to me. Just agree to these 18 conditions. Let's sit down and talk about the compensation peacefully. Compensation? For some reason, the Sher family felt that these two words sounded a little familiar. At the same time, the spies lying in ambush outside the Sher family's house had already returned to their respective houses to report the results of their investigation. The young Crown Prince Consort is abnormal, family head. Young Crown Prince Consort, there's nothing left to play with now. She's going straight to the Sher family's door and using the 5 Thunders array to suppress them. Now she's asking for compensation. Master, in my opinion, it's better to play it safe. Who knows if this fire will burn our house down if we go to the rescue? Such conversations were widely spread among the aristocratic families of all sizes in the capital. Everyone knew that it was that little pervert, the young Crown Prince Consort, who had set up this confinement array to trap the entire Sher family inside. 18 conditions for compensation. It's not a lot. Agree to it and I guarantee you won't lose out. Get your master to come out and talk to me. I guarantee. He was still talking in his head. A slightly aged voice suddenly interrupted his monologue. For you friends outside, could you please let us know the truth? In this world, there are only a few families who can make the Crown Princess come to their door to collect their debts, Arbor said coldly. The Sher family is one of them. Everyone, Crown Princess, thank you so much. Damn it, you make it sound like it's a great honor to have you come to their door to collect their debts. They must have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck. By this time, Master Sher had already been helped to the courtyard and stood in the middle of the courtyard. Crown Princess, I didn't expect you to be the one who attacked the Sher family. Master Sher was still recovering from his injuries, so he didn't dare to speak too loudly. May this old man know why the Crown Prince Consort has set up such an inescapable trap to deal with our Sher family? Because the Sher family deserves to die. Arbor's cold voice was like a bucket of cold water, drenching them from head to toe. At the same time, Sher Yongqian was pacing back and forth in her room. For the past few days, she had been strangely anxious. She couldn't calm down. What was going on? Of course, she couldn't have anything to do with the Sher family's siege. This was the entire Sher family's problem. She wasn't the only one trapped in the Sher family's house. What was she so anxious about? Sher Yongqian had been like an ant on a hot pan for the past few days. She couldn't eat or sleep well, and her lips were curled into a firecracker. Miss, if this goes on, Master wants to gather everyone's food for the time being, her personal maid said worriedly. Her personal maidservant said anxiously, if we don't have any food in our hands in the future, do we really have to wait until we are at the end of our rope? Although they wouldn't run out of food in the short term, they were trapped in this house. But as the family continued to consume, there would be a day when they ran out of food. Those Xiozhou with high cultivation could survive without a meal for 10 days to half a month. Chapter 35-27. Poor mortals like them. If they didn't eat for 3 meals, they would be so hungry that they would feel dizzy and weak all over. At that time, they wouldn't even have the strength to escape even if they wanted to. Sher Yongqian was also very vexed. She was a spiritual cultivator in any case and had an inner world that could resist hunger. However, she was constantly unable to absorb food and was trapped in the same place for a long time, so she naturally felt vexed. Moreover, there were large confinement arrays everywhere that sealed all spiritual energy outside the array. Even if she wanted to enter closed-door cultivation, there was simply no spiritual energy to absorb. In this way, wouldn't she be as miserable as a trapped beast? No, she had to think of a way to get out. Just as Sher Yongqian was pacing around the room, she suddenly heard the little stoic's ice-cold voice that sounded like broken pearls falling on a plate clearly coming from outside the room. Sher Yongqian's entire body inexplicably trembled violently several times. No, that was impossible. It was impossible that the little girl came here to seek revenge after her deeds were exposed. But if that wasn't the case, then what right did the little Crown Princess have to come and make trouble for their entire Sher family? Sher Yongqian's heart sank, and a bad premonition instantly welled up in her heart. At this time, Shi Yongqian heard her father's voice that was holding back his anger. This old man doesn't know what the crown princess means by this? How does the Shi family deserve to die? Although the crown princess holds a high position and is the wife of the future heir apparent, if she can't convince people with reason, then she definitely can't convince them at all. Yes. Yi Lai immediately continued in a clear voice. The Shi family indulged their daughter and sent people to the lower star domain's Sikong planet with inhumane intentions. They killed more than 100 commoners, and more than 1,000 soldiers from the lower star domain lost their lives in a battle with them. Such a heartless and unscrupulous way of doing things simply deserves to die. When Shi Yongqian heard this, she was so frightened that she fell on her butt on the stool. Was it really because of the incident at the lower star domain's Sikong planet that they came looking for trouble? The crown princess, she actually knew about it? Impossible. How was that possible? Could it be that she had already gone to the lower star domain? No wonder they couldn't contact Miao Sheng for a while. Could it be that Miao Sheng had been killed by them? Patriarch Shi raised his head and roared angrily outside the array. Who allowed my daughter to go on a killing spree in the lower star field? Make yourself clear. Weren't you the one who did it? Stay up late asked coldly. Even if it wasn't you, it has something to do with your daughter. Nonsense. Patriarch Shi roared, and then coughed continuously. He felt stifled and his heart was extremely flustered. Crown Princess, if you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Looks like you won't shed tears until you see the coffin. Stay up late said coldly. How about this? Go to the door and open it. We'll let you meet someone. Patriarch Shi really didn't want to open the door. After all, the Shi family had been trapped here for a long time. As soon as he opened the door, he was bound to see a bunch of onlookers, which was really annoying. These onlookers seemed to have nothing better to do. They liked to wait outside the Shi family's door and continue to watch the Shi family make a fool of themselves. How is it? Patriarch Shi, you haven't responded for a long time. I'm guessing you don't dare to open the door to recognize your people? The head of the Shi clan was infuriated. He gave his son a look. What's so scary about the Shi family? The eldest son of the Shi family hurried forward and yanked open the door. He looked outside with a cold gaze. Chapter 35-28. At first glance, he saw a little stoic girl with an exquisite face sitting upright at the entrance of his house with a fruit platter in her hands. She didn't look like she was here to collect a debt at all. Instead, she seemed to be one with the group of onlookers behind her, completely looking like they were here to watch a show. That was right. Although this young crown prince consort had said that she was making trouble at their doorstep, the one who had been shouting the whole time was one of her subordinates. She had not even moved her mouth twice. Crown Princess. The eldest son of the Shi family glared at the stoic-faced young lady. Who do you want us to meet? Xiao Mu clapped her tender and fair palms twice. Immediately, someone pushed a blindfolded man forward. He stumbled and fell to his knees in front of Arbor. Arbor gestured with her hand. A purple forest guard stepped forward and waved away the black cloth covering the man's face. The sudden blinding light made the man close his eyes in discomfort. When he opened his eyes again, he met Shi family's eldest son's eyes. Shi family's eldest son's pupils contracted in shock, but he suppressed himself and didn't call out, Miao Sheng. How is it? This is your young Mrs. Servant, right? Ao Yi asked calmly. Who is this? Shi family's eldest son immediately reacted. Perhaps today's incident had something to do with his second sister, Shi Yongqian, and the entire Shi family. However, he was also a shrewd person. After thinking for a while, he immediately denied it. He thought that as long as he didn't acknowledge Miao Sheng's identity, the little crown princess wouldn't be able to use a servant to frame the Shi family for some groundless crime. When Xiao Mu saw him flatly deny it, she was neither anxious nor angry. She merely gazed at him coldly and nodded indifferently. Ao Yi. Ao Yi picked up the list of compensation and read aloud. The first condition is to offer up your Shi family's second miss, Shi Yongqian's head. The Shi family's eldest son's expression changed. Then he laughed out loud. What an arrogant crown princess. You brought a servant we don't know and barged into our Shur clan. Do you think it's possible to convict our Shur clan with the crime of defying the heavens with just 3 sentences? Arbor looked at him coldly. I want you to tell me who this person is. Then, without waiting for the patriarch of the Shur family to call out, a shining jade talisman landed on the eldest son of the Shur family. Young Master Shur, do you really not know who this person is? He's the personal servant of my second sister, Shur Yongqian, Miao Sheng. The eldest son of the Shur family was stunned for a moment. After being hit by the dictum talisman, he immediately answered obediently. It was too late for Master Shur to stop all of this. He allowed the eldest son of the Shur family, who was under the control of the dictum talisman, to reveal Miao Sheng's identity. Master Shur's face instantly turned ashen, and he lowered his body dejectedly. The Shur family is really a rich and powerful family. Arbor's icy voice sounded again. Have this person called Miao Sheng recount his crimes anew. Another dictum talisman was shot into Miao Sheng's body in the blink of an eye. Miao Sheng immediately stood up and guffawed at the sky. He brazenly recounted all of his crimes. This included how he accepted the Shur family's second miss, Shur Yongqian's entrustment, how he repeatedly tried to find the way to Sikong planet, and how he finally arrived at the Mo Kingdom capital after many failures. Chapter 35-29. He then spoke of how he captured Jolin and how he colluded with the Pangu clan to send a group of subordinates to throw the entire Mo Kingdom capital into chaos. He recounted it all in a smug manner. Everyone was flabbergasted. They stared incredulously at the smug Miao Sheng and couldn't help shuddering. This person was done for. Miao Sheng deserves 10,000 deaths. Even 10,000 deaths wouldn't be enough to atone for his crimes, Arbor said coldly. Where are the Crown Princess' personal guards? Here. This person harbors evil intentions and is deranged. He shall be sentenced to the most severe punishment. Arbor's icy voice fell into everyone's ears without the slightest bit of warmth. It was like icy spring water flowing past, chilling everyone's hearts. Cripple his cultivation and execute it in public. Serve as a warning to others. Yes. The purple forest guard swarmed forward and broke Miao Sheng's arms and legs, crippling his spiritual energy. They picked him up like he was a little chick and dragged him to a nearby pillar to tie him up. The pain of having his cultivation crippled caused Miao Sheng to snap out of his daze from the talisman's control. He couldn't help but cry out, Patriarch, eldest young master, save me. Save Patriarch. I was also acting according to second Mrs. orders. Patriarch, save me. I am so loyal and devoted to the Shur family. You can't treat me like this. Save me, save me, save me. As pieces of flesh and blood splattered down, Miao Sheng let out blood-curdling screams. The onlookers crowding around the Shur family's entrance never expected to see such a gory scene and hastily retreated in fright. The timid women hastily picked up their children and ran home to hide, not daring to watch the spectacle any longer. Arbor said coldly, hand over Shur Yongqian's head and this crown princess will release all the children under the age of 10 in the Shur family. Crown princess, please quell your anger. The Shur family is innocent. The child is innocent, but for the sins your Shur family has committed in the Lower Star region, I'm afraid that even the lives of your entire family would not be enough. Arbor said coldly, if I don't punish you severely today, how can I face the thousands of broken families in the lower space zone? Patriarch Shur immediately panicked. He was completely flustered now. Offending this young crown princess was equivalent to offending the crown prince of the divine land. The crown prince was so powerful that the purple forest guard alone would be difficult for the Shur family to deal with. Of course, he didn't dare to confront the little crown princess directly. He hurriedly cried out, the crown princess is wise. Miao Sheng's mistake has nothing to do with the Shur family. At this time, Miao Sheng had already been cut dozens of times. When he heard Master Shur's excuse, he immediately shouted, bullshit. Is the Shur family afraid to admit what they did? Did second young mistress Shur instruct me to do all these? Second young mistress Shur also said that she would capture all the crown princess's family and bring them to the divine land. Then, she would force the crown princess to mutilate herself and beg for mercy. A cold glint flashed across Ao Ye's eyes. He yelled, "How dare she!" Separated by the transparent talisman array, Patriarch Shur fell to his knees at the door and cried out in alarm, "The crown princess is wise, the crown princess is wise. This has nothing to do with the Shur family. If you blame it on the Shur family, then you're being too extreme." Yes, this was all caused by second young mistress Shur Yongqian. When the eldest son of the Shur family came to his senses, he quickly knelt and cried out. Chapter 35-30. Crown Princess, the person you're looking for should be her. Go, call second miss out. Patriarch Shur turned around and bellowed at an elder. What did this unfilial daughter do to offend the crown princess and implicate the entire Shur family? Xiao Mu carefully scrutinized this family head Shur's panic-stricken expression, and she instantly became puzzled. A person's first reaction in a moment of fear and anxiety could not be faked. Patriarch Shur's current behavior made it seem as if he was completely unaware of Shur Yongqian's actions. Could it be that Shur Yongqian had sent Miao Sheng to the lower star domain to capture people on her own and had nothing to do with the Shur family? The real mastermind behind Shur Yongqian might not be as simple as Patriarch Shur? She seemed to have thought of something as her eyes flickered. Patriarch Shur, I, the crown princess, am a fair and impartial person. I will not wrong the Shur family for no reason, Arbor said coldly. Do you dare to accept my dictum talisman's test? I dare. I dare. Patriarch Shur hurriedly raised his head and said resolutely, I dare. He no longer cared about being a laughingstock in front of the crowd. If he could save the lives of more than 1,000 people in the Shur family, even if he had to lose face, what harm was there in making a sacrifice? Seeing his resolute expression, Xiao Mu believed him a bit more in her heart. Nodding, she flicked a dictum talisman and asked a few simple questions before keeping it. She looked coldly at Patriarch Shur and said, I, the crown princess, want to confront Shur Yongqian face to face. Second miss is here. Second miss is here. Everyone turned around and saw two elders angrily escorting a woman with messy hairpins and long hair. They were escorting her all the way here. Kneel. Patriarch Shur roared furiously. You unfilial daughter! My daughter, my daughter! Madame Shur cried as she chased after them. She wanted to stop them from abusing her daughter, but an elder flung her onto the blue and white tiles with a flick of his sleeve. You dare to cry? Master Shur scolded harshly. It's all your fault for spoiling her all the time and raising her to be so lawless and arrogant. Now, the entire family had been implicated. You've completely disgraced me. Madame Shur sobbed a few times and wanted to refute, but Master Shur glared at her. Shur Yongqian was forced to kneel on the ground. She felt the hair on her knees stiffen. It was so painful that she almost cried. She turned her head and asked in a soft and delicate voice, Daddy, what are you doing? Patriarch, when I went to the second young miss room just now, I saw that she had packed up quite a few valuables and was planning to escape. An elder directly exposed her intentions and looked at Shur Yongqian with disdain. Why was she pretending to be weak and innocent now? When he went in just now, she had several bags in her hands and was about to put them into her inner world to escape. He had caused such a huge disaster for his clansmen, yet he still had the face to run away? This was disregarding the safety of the entire clan. Selfish to the extreme. Unfilial daughter. Patriarch Shur shouted harshly again, What have you done? Quickly confess the truth. Shur Yongqian's small face was pale, and she looked like a delicate little white flower. Daddy, what are you doing? What did I do? She saw the stoic-faced crown princess sitting at her door and immediately cursed inwardly. Chapter 35-31. Her maiden heart instantly started pounding nervously. She knelt there and could even hear her own drumming heartbeat. When Madame Shur saw this, she hurriedly pounced over and hugged her daughter as she wailed, Family head, you're discerning. Don't disappoint our daughter's heart. Our daughter has been well-mannered and sensible since she was young. How could she possibly send an assassin to the lower realm to kill people? How could she be so capable? She's the most gentle girl. Madame Shi wailed. Arbor didn't wait for Shi Yongqian to argue. Her fingertips moved, and a light abruptly flicked into Shi Yongqian's forehead. Shi Yongqian, did you send Miao Xing to Sikong Planet to capture and kill people? No. Shi Yongqian shook her head decisively. This caused Arbor, who flicked a dictum talisman, to reveal a slightly surprised expression as she stared at her without blinking. Heh, immunity talisman. Arbor looked closely at her and found the crux of the problem. She nodded as she said mildly. It looked like there was indeed someone behind Shi Yongqian. This immunity talisman wasn't something that just any normal person could draw. This was an Earth-level talisman, and it was the higher-level kind. It could be immune to all negative effects, including dictum, immobilization, restraint, drowsiness, and so on. Arbor also knew how to draw it, but this immunity talisman made by an Earth-level talisman master looked rather interesting. Although he wasn't like Arbor, who was used to making double and triple talismans, the talisman energy flowing on this immunity talisman was very abundant. It was even somewhat comparable to Sir Jojo's talisman energy. This talisman master looked very powerful. Arbor's eyes lit up as she stared at Shi Yongqian. She suddenly reached out and beckoned, and everyone couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Shi Yongqian's entire body seemed to fly out uncontrollably. She swiftly passed through that transparent protective array and was sucked in by Arbor all the way from the main entrance, flying directly in front of her. Arbor abruptly reached out her small, fair claws and abruptly grasped Shi Yongqian's wrist. What are you trying to do? Shi Yongqian shouted harshly. You used a dictum talisman to test me just now, proving that I didn't send Miao Xing to do those things at all. Feeling her bones ache, Shi Yongqian revealed a frightened expression under Arbor's tight grip. Crown Princess, I know you don't like me. Ever since you saw me, you've been targeting me. But I've never done anything to get in your way, Arbor's expression was somewhat gloomy, and his eyes that stared at her emitted traces of coldness. You've offended me from the very beginning. Arbor's fingers moved to her neck and strangled her. Shi Yongqian, don't think that I can't do anything to you just because you're wearing an immunity talisman. She murmured softly, her 5 hard fingers gripping her neck tightly. Tell me, how should I let you die? Shi Yongqian gazed in horror at Xiao Mu, who was just inches away from her. She lowered her head slightly and stared straight at him. There was a hint of evil in her eyes, and it felt extremely abnormal. She wasn't a normal person. Shi Yongqian said this to herself in her heart, but her body couldn't stop trembling slightly. You sent so many people to Sikong Planet to cause a ruckus, took the lives of so many innocent people, and almost caused me to lose my most beloved family. How do you think I'll deal with you? Chapter 35-32. Dad. Shi Yongqian kept calling for Patriarch Shi, her body trembling uncontrollably. She's a lunatic, Dad, she's a lunatic, Dad. Save me, She's a lunatic. Arbor choked her little mouth, forcing her to raise her head and open her mouth with great difficulty. Shi Yongqian's eyes revealed deep fear. She shook her head repeatedly, crying until her snot and tears were all over her face. So dirty. Arbor flicked her finger, and Shi Yongqian felt as if her throat was on fire. Something seemed to be wrapped in flames and rolled down her throat. It burned her organs and slid to the deepest part of her heart and lungs. Ugh. She tried to spit it out, but that pill-like thing melted in her mouth, turning into a stream of heat and disappearing without a trace. Shi Yongqian was too terrified. Her entire body trembled as she kept wailing, No, don't kill me, don't kill me. Don't kill me. I won't kill you. Arbor looked at her with a gloomy gaze. She suddenly reached out a finger and very discreetly inserted a talisman between her brows. She leaned close to her ear and whispered, I will let you, in the most painful way, die in the hands of the person you love the most. No, impossible, no, impossible. Impossible. Arbor tilted her little head and looked at her coldly. Why is it impossible? She leaned close to her ear and whispered word by word, I gave you the most poisonous curse in the world. I curse you, to be killed by the person you love the most, in the most painful and lowly position, to never fall into the cycle of reincarnation, to never be reincarnated. Her voice was cold and emotionless, like a poisonous spring that brushed past Shi Yongqian's heart. It was so vicious and terrifying that Shi Yongqian couldn't help but tremble. Her eyes widened in fright as she gazed at Xiao Mu in horror with an extremely contorted posture. No, no, impossible. Impossible. You are, save me, father, save me. She is a pervert, she is a talisman. Talisman, a gust of hot air suddenly rose from her heart and lungs, blocking her throat and burning it to the point that she couldn't make a sound at all. Shi Yongqian wriggled her body and covered her mouth with her hand in panic. Her eyes were filled with shock. She turned her head to look in the direction of her father and the others, and then turned to look in the direction of the crowd of confused citizens. Shi Yongqian's mouth kept moving and her lips kept moving. She kept repeating the same sentence. The crown princess is an evil charm master. She is a charm master, a charm master. But the crowd only saw her lips trembling. How could they figure out what she was talking about? They saw her face was distorted, her expression was ferocious and green. Everyone kept retreating. How could they dare to look at her? As if she had gone mad, Shi Yongqian pointed at Arbor and screamed, "Charm master! Charm master!" She was a charm master. She was a charm master that was not tolerated by the world. As long as her identity as a charm master was exposed, then there was nothing else to say. She was bound to become a person who was reviled and despised by the world. Just like that high and mighty Mu family's eldest Miss Mu Rochuan, she was despised by the world and abandoned by her family because her ugly identity as a charm master was exposed. Chapter 35-33. Shi Yongqian looked like she was possessed. The young crown prince consort glanced at her coldly and then retreated several steps. She repeatedly shouted as though she was putting on an act, "Hurry and stop her. This person has gone mad." The purple forest guards quickly rushed forward and blocked Shi Yongqian's path. "Why haven't you retreated yet?" they shouted with disdain. "You'll be held responsible if you disturb the crown princess." Shi Yongqian was about to go crazy. She rushed to the front of the crowd and grabbed a passerby by the chest. Her eyes were practically glowing red as she stared at the passerby. She screamed, "Pen, pen, pen, pen." She wanted to write down the crimes of the young crown princess so that this damn talisman master would have nowhere to hide. Arbor flicked his sleeve and opened a small gap in the talisman array above the Shi residence. He looked at Patriarch Shi coldly. "Come out." Family head Shi immediately walked out and bowed to the young crown prince consort. Stay Up Late immediately stepped forward and handed a list of compensation to the Shi family head. Patriarch Shi's eyelids twitched as he read through the list. His heart clenched and tears welled up in his eyes. This compensation was going to empty the entire Shi family's pockets. "Our crown princess has changed her mind. As long as you expel second Miss Shi from the Shi family, her life will be spared," Lao Yi said coldly. "Also, you must abide by the second condition. Hand over all the subordinates related to second Miss Shi and Miao Sheng. The third condition is that the Shi family's mine on Mount Heaven Saint will belong to the crown princess from now on. As for the other miscellaneous items, there are more than a dozen lines of compensation. You've seen them yourself just now. You have half a month to settle all the compensation. Sign it if you can. If you can't, fine. Patriarch Shi wanted to cry but had no tears. But what else could he say? It was already good enough that he could save the lives of most of them. He wasn't a fool. How could he not know that Shi Yongqian had indeed sent people to the lower star field to cause trouble? The little crown princess only asked them to hand over the people related to Shi Yongqian and Miao Sheng. Letting go of the rest of the Shi family was already being extremely benevolent. As a matter of fact, the little crown princess also needed this group of people to intimidate those idiots who were ready to make a move. She wanted to warn them not to think too highly of themselves and to take care of themselves. Immediately, the entire Shi family was filled with cries and wails. All the disciples related to Shi Yongqian and Miao Sheng were brought out. Arbor looked at them coldly and handed them over to stay up late. Listen up. If anyone dares to touch this crown princess's family in the future, I'll kill them. These people will serve as a warning to you. Life is precious. Don't disregard the life and death of your family. If there's anyone from the Sher family who wants to avenge these people, come at me if you're not afraid of death. Don't blame this crown princess for not warning you. Arbor looked at Patriarch Sher coldly. If anyone from the Sher family comes looking for this crown princess for revenge, this crown princess will destroy your entire family. Don't bring trouble to yourselves. Patriarch Sher's pupils shrank. He quickly shouted, "No, we wouldn't dare. We wouldn't dare. The Sher family has no intention of disrespecting the crown princess. The Sher family is willing to sign the contract and serve the crown princess and His Highness the Crown Prince for generations to come." "Good that you're sensible," Arbor said coldly, her stoic face expressionless. Chapter 35-34. Tong, form a small debt collection team and collect all of the Sher family's debts within half a month. When the time comes, transport them to Seekong planet. Yes, Crown Princess. The Mo Kingdom capital had suffered a great calamity and urgently needed supplies and money to support it. On what basis could those people peacefully sit in this divine province and enjoy life after throwing the city's citizens into utter chaos and losing both their wealth and lives? They had to compensate. Even if it wasn't the Sher family's fault, who told them to raise such a troublemaker daughter? Since they didn't know how to raise a child, then they would bear the bitter consequences this child brought them. Leaving behind Aoyi and his group to supervise the punishment, Arbor then left first with Saishio and Li. The young crown prince consort walked anxiously at the front, her back view seeming a bit lonely. Saishio and Li exchanged glances before hastily chasing after her. For some reason, although the crown princess was unstoppable in her massacre, Saishio and Li could both sense that the young crown princess was currently in a bad mood. In reality, the young crown princess was indeed in a very bad mood. She walked extremely quickly, and as her plain white robes fluttered, a sense of irritation arose spontaneously. Although I've settled a long-standing enmity, reality has proven that I'm not happy right now. How I wish that you were by my side right now. Accompanying me, her icy eyes turned slightly, and she suddenly saw peach blossoms fluttering and scattering in the sky. In her daze, she saw a red-clothed man holding a small pink umbrella walk to her side with light steps. He said with a grin, My Jojo seems to be in a very bad mood." Arbor glanced at him and saw that he was actually carrying a bald little monk in his hand. That little thing kept kicking his legs and clasped his palms together, saying in all seriousness, "Benefactor, don't carry this little monk. This little monk isn't a rice bag." "Go comfort my family's benefactor then," the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal said as he stuffed that little bald head into Arbor's arms. "Benefactor, your aura of malice is so heavy. You don't know how to speak." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal smacked the little fellow's bald head. "What nonsense are you talking about? My Jojo has always been a soft and adorable little fellow. Where did you get your hostility from?" The little monk wrinkled his nose and said in all seriousness, "Benefactor, it's not right for you to lie through your teeth. Benefactress, how about this little monk recite a meditation mantra for you?" Xiao Mu's extremely bad mood inexplicably turned for the better after the two people's jesting and jabbering. She nodded and raised her hand to stroke little Baldy's slippery head. "You can read it. Namo, he luo na, duo luo yi, namo, Ajay." As a result, little Baldy's noisy voice rang incessantly by the young crown prince consort's ears, incessantly prattling on and on. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal could not help but roll his eyes. Why did he have the misconception that he should not have let this nagging little Baldy out? Miss Chiao carried the nagging little monk and returned to the Chiao family's courtyard. Naturally, she did not mention it. Meanwhile, after the horrified Shi Yongqian saw the crown prince consort leave, she immediately leaped in front of her father, family head Shi, and hugged her father's arms. Her throat continuously emitted cracking noises, but she couldn't utter a single word. She glanced at a withered branch on the ground and hurriedly let go of family head Shi's hands. She rushed over to pick up the branch and gestured repeatedly on the ground. But who would have the patience to watch her gesticulate like a crazy woman? Chapter 35. The head of the Shi family didn't even look at her and turned to leave. Shi Yongqian rushed forward to block the head of the Shi family. She gesticulated anxiously and waved the branch in her hand, gesturing incessantly at the head of the Shi family. Since she couldn't speak, the head of the Shi family was impatient to the extreme. Seeing that she was still stubbornly blocking his way, he impatiently slapped her across the face. "Wicked girl! Get out of my way!" The eldest son of the Shi family was also furious. The Shi family had so many assets. Just because of this brainless sister of his had committed such a heinous crime, they had to hand it all over to someone else? How could he accept this? How could he be willing? Right now, he wanted nothing more than to kill this foolish sister of his who couldn't do anything right. He pushed Shi Yongqian away forcefully and shouted angrily, "Haven't you had enough of being a fool? Don't you think you've caused enough harm to the family? If you still have a shred of conscience, you'd better get out of the family from now on and stay as far away from the Shi family as possible. The Shi family won't care whether you live or die in the future." Madame Shi wailed and lunged forward to hit her son. "That's your biological sister. Eldest son, how could you say that?" Shi Yongqian fell to the ground and used the branch in her hand to draw on the ground with all her might. As she was drawing, she suddenly realized that her hands were not under her control at all. Just now, her messy actions in front of them had not drawn a single word at all. It was no wonder that everyone was staring at her in bewilderment. What was going on? Could it be that her brain couldn't control her hands anymore? Shi Yongqian stared at her hands in horror. She tried to draw on the ground with all her might, but all she could see was a mess on the ground. She couldn't make out a single word at all. What had this demon-like crown prince consort done to him? Why couldn't her hands even write? She couldn't even write the simple words, "Talisman Master"? She couldn't write. She couldn't speak and her hands couldn't write. How could she complain to others about her grievances? How could she expose that evil talisman master to the public? Shi Yongqian scrambled to her feet like a madwoman and threw herself at her parents with all her might. The head of the Shi family ordered with a cold face, "Close the door." From now on, the Shi family will no longer have such an embarrassing daughter. Bang! The two heavy pear blossom wooden doors slammed shut right in front of Shi Yongqian. Madame Shi originally wanted to scream, but after being hit by Patriarch Shi's hand, she naturally fainted and stopped screaming. "Father, mother, father, mom." Shi Yongqian pounded on the door with all her might and screamed silently. She could not believe that there would be a day where she would be chased out of the Shi family. It was all because of the crown princess. It was all because of that bitch that she was chased out of the Shi family and caused her body to become abnormal. She couldn't even speak and her mind was muddled. She wanted to kill that woman. She wanted to kill that woman. Shi Yongqian went crazy. When she saw the citizens around her, she rushed over like a madwoman. When the commoners saw that she had gone crazy, they immediately scattered like birds and beasts. They all scattered and ran out. Shi Yongqian caught hold of a middle-aged woman. Filled with anger, she turned it into a palm and hit the woman's head. The people around her screamed in shock. They thought that the woman would die after being hit by the second daughter of the Shi family. Chapter 35-36. Who would have thought that second Miss Shi's slap would land on the woman's head like cotton? Not to mention hurting the woman in the slightest, her strength probably wouldn't even be able to kill a mosquito. The woman was originally scared to the point that her face was ashen, but in an instant, she regained her senses as if she had been revived. She pushed away the second young miss of the Shi family and swung her thick and round arm, heavily slapping Shi Yongqian's face. "You little wench, how dare you hit me? If I don't show you my power, you think you're invincible." As she spoke, the woman slapped Shi Yongqian's face several times in a row, causing her head to hit the dirt wall next to her. Shi Yongqian's eyes were filled with fear and disbelief. Her lips trembled as she looked down at her hands and shook her head repeatedly. Her expression was extremely frightened. "No, it's impossible, it's impossible. How could she not have any cultivation? She didn't have any cultivation? No, it couldn't be. It must have been her imagination. How could she have become a cripple? No, she wasn't a cripple. She definitely shouldn't be a cripple. She was Shi Yongqian, the high and mighty second miss of the Shi family. She was a master blacksmith, the second miss who had 5 levels of spiritual fire and was in the spiritual realm. She had become a cripple. It was Arbor, it must be Arbor. Arbor had given her that fiery pill before and had crippled all her cultivation. What right does a good-for-nothing like you, who can't even take care of yourself, have to stay by the young master's side? Ridiculous. A cripple like you should die. Why aren't you dead yet? Don't you think you're a cripple living in this world with broken arms and legs like a bedbug? A cripple, a cripple, a cripple. A pair of indifferent eyes stared coldly at the woman who was being pushed to the ground and kicked by the fat woman. He pursed his thin lips and didn't say a word. Second master, do you want this subordinate to go and save second Miss Shi? Who asked you to be a busybody? When the subordinate heard his master's words, he immediately lowered his head and didn't dare to say anything else. Jojo, if you want Shi Yongqian to become a cripple, then I'll do as you wish. Second young master looked at Shi Yongqian coldly and then turned to leave. Shi Yongqian, have you ever thought that in this life, the one who has become a cripple is you? Second young mistress Shi turned around and happened to see a familiar piece of clothing at the corner of the street. The color and style of the fabric at the corner of the clothing were so familiar. Axine. Second young mistress Shi crawled a few steps on the ground in panic. She wanted to shout, but there was no sound. The Shi family's second young mistress finally got up from the ground and stumbled a few steps before she was blocked by a few ruffians and hooligans. A trace of panic flashed through Shi Yongqian's eyes. She dug her fingers into the wall and shook her head at those hooligans. Her eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as she angrily shouted. Without any sound, there would naturally be no deterrence. Oh, so you're mute. What an ugly face with a bloody head. Her figure is not bad. A few ruffians with bad intentions surrounded Shi Yongqian and grabbed her hands and started to grope her. Second master, second young mistress Shi seems to have been pestered by a few hooligans. You talk too much. Qin Xen glanced at the subordinate indifferently. He didn't even look back at Shi Yongqian and immediately left with his men. Chapter 35-37. Axen, don't go, Axen. Axen, save me, don't go. Axen. Shi Yongqian's eyes revealed a look of despair. She stumbled and tried to break free from the hooligans' encirclement, but someone reached out and hugged her waist. A few hands wandered back and forth on her body with evil intentions. She was so shocked that her eyes rolled back and she almost fainted. Without her cultivation and spiritual power, Shi Yongqian was nothing more than a cripple. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't even beat these soft-footed hooligans in front of her. She could only silently cry and wait for them in horror. Her mouth squirmed as she kept shouting, "Let go of me, let go of me." But those hooligans already had crooked thoughts. How could they let go of the prey that was already in their hands? They dragged her into the alley at the side. The crowd that was originally watching the show couldn't help but slowly disperse. Looking at the Shi family's second young mistress being dragged away by the hooligans, some people couldn't help but sigh and shake their heads. The young mistress of the Shi family actually fell into such a state. Her life is worse than a dog's. Shi Yongqian was dragged all the way into the alley. She looked at the ugly hooligans surrounding her in horror. She couldn't help but wave her hands, wanting to resist. Unexpectedly, he was slapped in the face, and the cloth on his shoulder was rudely torn by the person. Shi Yongqian let out a silent scream and hurriedly used her hands to close her clothes. Who would have thought that in the next second, she would be hugged by a local ruffian? With a forceful tug, her clothes were torn apart. As the clothes on her body became less and less, her snow-white skin was clearly seen under the sunlight. The hooligans swallowed their saliva. Their eyes flashed with excitement and they suddenly pounced on the Shi family's second young mistress. Shi Yongqian couldn't make a sound at all. Moreover, she was a soft-footed waste with no cultivation. She couldn't stop these lowly hooligans in front of her. When night fell, the Sher family's second young mistress, who was filthy and ruined, crawled out of the alley like a ghost. Her tears had long dried up the moment she was bullied. What grievances! What hatred! Now they had all turned into defeat and emptiness. She was like a wandering soul, walking on the street in ragged clothes. There was a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth, and only a dried blood clot remained on her forehead. She was like a wandering ghost, swaying her body as she walked. Every step she took left a trail of blood, leaving a long trail of blood on the ground. A night watchman was walking towards her. When he saw second Miss Sher's ghostly appearance, he was so frightened that he screamed, thinking that he had seen a ghost. He even threw the night watchman's drum on the ground with a clang and turned around to stumble back to where he came from. Sher Yongqian's head was tilted. Every step she took left a bloody footprint. Her tattered clothes hung on her body like strips. Looking from afar, she really looked like a female ghost that had crawled out from the depths of hell. Even her eyes didn't have a trace of life. The crown princess had forced her to her death. It was the crown princess who forced her to her death. Sher Yongqian stubbornly shouted these words in her heart. She swayed all the way to the entrance of the palace. Today, she was going to hang herself at the entrance of the palace and use her blood to write down her crimes in arbor. Even if she died, she wanted this heartless woman to go to hell with her. She swayed as she walked. Suddenly, she collapsed on the street as if she was exhausted. Chapter 35-38. It was as if the scene of those ruffians tearing her clothes appeared in front of her eyes. That devilish teasing laughter lingered in her ears for a long time. They were so unbridled as they behaved atrociously on her body, tormenting her in such a cruel manner, tormenting her for several hours. Several hours? In broad daylight in a small alley like that. She already couldn't count how many people had bullied her. In the end, her body was already numb beyond belief. Sher Yongqian's eyes were red as she forcefully hammered the ground a few times with both hands. Her eyes were filled with empty hatred as she slowly raised her head. Under the illumination of the bright lanterns, she saw the two large characters of the Qin estate. Tears immediately welled up in Sher Yongqian's eyes. Like a worm, she climbed up the tall steps one by one and used her hands to pound on the vermilion door twice. At this time, the street was very quiet. It was already very late at night, and there wasn't a single person on the street. Only Sher Yongqian was like a madwoman as she desperately hammered on the Qin estate's door. However, she was already exhausted. Even if she used all her strength to pound on the door, the sound of knocking was actually just an inaudible dong-dong-dong sound. The servants guarding the door had already fallen asleep and naturally couldn't hear the sound of knocking outside. More and more tears welled up in Sher Yongqian's eyes. She really wanted to go in and ask second young master if he had also passed by the Sher estate's entrance just now. Did he leave her in the lurch? Or was her eyes playing tricks on her? No, that couldn't be. Sher Yongqian comforted her own heart as she collapsed in front of the Qin estate's entrance, repeatedly shaking her head. If a Xian saw her being driven out by her family, he definitely wouldn't stand idly by. If a Xan had passed by the Sher estate, there was no way he wouldn't have seen those ruffians harassing her. He also wouldn't have left with a flick of his sleeves and completely disregarded her life or death. Sher Yongqian's tears fell one by one, dripping onto the ground. Her eyes were filled with tears, completely blurring the night scene in front of her eyes. Suddenly, a black figure appeared in front of her. Sher Yongqian raised her head in astonishment. When she saw the person's face clearly, her eyes couldn't help but reveal an ecstatic expression. Decoration Wang Cheng? Wasn't he the second young master's personal bodyguard, Wang Cheng? When Huang Yong lifted her up, Sher Yongqian immediately panicked. She lowered her head and looked at the state of her clothes. She hurriedly wrapped her arms around her body, trying her best to hide all the messy marks on her body. Unfortunately, she was almost naked to begin with. No matter how tightly she hugged herself, it was impossible to cover up the lingering marks on her body. No, don't take me to see second young master. I'm so dirty right now. I don't want to see second young master. Sher Yongqian began to cry. She shook her head repeatedly and opened her mouth to speak a series of words. Wang Chung naturally could not hear her voice. He carried her to the crane garden where the second young master lived. Shi Yongqian felt that today was the darkest day of her life. She was actually forced to appear in the crane garden with her unkempt and filthy appearance. She looked at the young master of the Omega Kotoku who was sitting in the pavilion and playing chess with an enchanting woman in red. He merely sat there without saying anything. Those exquisite features revealed a faint coldness. Under the moonlight, he appeared as handsome and natural as a jade sculpture. Such a beautiful second young master made Shi Yongqian inexplicably feel a trace of inferiority. Chapter 35-39. She hurriedly took a step back, wanting to retreat behind the rockery to hide. Her body was really too dirty, and she didn't want to meet the godlike man in her heart at this time. The enchanting red-clothed woman in the pavilion raised her eyes and chuckled. "Oh, why do you look so disheveled? You look very miserable." Young Master Omega Kotoku placed a piece and frowned. "You're about to lose." "So what if I lose? It's not like I've lost to you for the first time. Do I need you to remind me?" That woman winked seductively and flipped over to sit on the chess table, throwing herself into second young master's arms. The twins, Tang Quan and Tang Li, who were standing beside the two, couldn't help but feel disgusted. In the past, they didn't know that Ling was a man. Now that they knew that this freaking old demon liked to pretend to be a woman, they felt that she was strange no matter where they looked at her, and usually kept a respectful distance from her. Young Master Omega Kotoku naturally wouldn't let her throw herself at him, and he directly dodged to the side. Flicking his sleeves, he indifferently said, "Take her to the confinement room." Then he left without even looking at the item before he used it. Shi Yongqian's heart instantly sank to the bottom of the valley, as if it had fallen into an ice cellar. Was second young master so disgusted that he felt that even a glance at her would dirty his eyes? Just like that, Shi Yongqian's tears fell uncontrollably, and she couldn't hold them back at all. Ling clicked his tongue and threw a green robe to her. "Here, little lady, put it on. TSK, so pitiful. A delicate little beauty has been tormented to this extent. These people are really heavy-handed." Shi Yongqian could hear the mockery in his voice, but there wasn't much sympathy. Her ice-cold fingers tightly gripped the robe on her body, and she found that she was once again picked up by Wang Chung and brought to the confinement room that young Master Omega Kotoku had mentioned. Of course, she knew what kind of place the confinement room was. It was a small confinement room that the Qin estate used to treat prisoners. She had already suffered such a huge grievance, and second young master still wanted to interrogate her as if she was a criminal? But why did he treat her like this? The bitterness in Shi Yongqian's heart almost drowned her. "Go in." Huang Chong forcefully pushed her away, and Shi Yongqian's head crashed into a small room. When she turned around, the entire room had already turned dark, and she could only hear a loud, clang sound. She pounced to the side of the metal door and knocked heavily on it, calling out silently, "Axe." On the other hand, Arbor only received a message from the night pavilion after breakfast, saying that Shi Yongqian had been bullied badly by a group of hooligans. After Stay Up Late finished his report, he stood to the side and looked at the little crown princess, who had an uncertain expression on her face. The crown princess didn't look happy. Her brows were gloomy, as if a thick dark cloud was pressing down on her, which could erupt at any time. "Shameless!" Arbor shouted angrily. "Take some men and find those people. Castrate them all and send them to the Prince of Jianpei's estate to be eunuchs. This crown princess wants this group of animals to beg for death for the rest of their lives." Stay Up Late's mouth twitched, but he didn't dare to say anything else. He could only nod and leave. Xiao Mu forcefully smashed a cup, her face brimming with anger. Kai Xiao hurriedly went forward to clean up the broken pieces. Kai Chi didn't understand, but she still asked boldly, "Your Highness, why is the crown princess unhappy?" Chapter 35-40. Wasn't it good that second young mistress Shi received her retribution? Hadn't the crown princess always looked down on second young mistress? Why was she standing up for her now? Kai Chi's little head was filled with questions. Kai Xiao hurriedly tugged at her sleeve, hinting that she shouldn't play dumb. The young crown princess said angrily, "Such despicable methods are extremely disgusting. If she wanted to deal with someone, why would she need to resort to such underhanded methods? She could just face the enemy openly. Even if she was an evil person, she should do it openly. She disdained to resort to such tricks. As a woman, she naturally knew what Shi Yongqian's experience yesterday meant. Kai Xiao, why are you tugging at me?" Kai Chi scratched her head in astonishment. The young crown princess had already left the dormitory angrily. Kai Chi couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "I really don't understand why the crown princess is angry. You're such a blockhead. Now that something like this has happened, others will definitely think that the crown prince consort sent someone to do it. Even if it's just an accident. How can the crown princess be willing to take the blame?" Kai Xiao shook her head and pursed her lips. She lowered her voice and said, "If the crown princess doesn't use a thunderous method and immediately make a statement, rumors might spread throughout the imperial capital in the afternoon." Kai Chi looked enlightened. She raised her hand and patted her head. She said in annoyance, "Sister Kai Xiao, you're still the smart one. I'm really too stupid. I can't even understand such simple logic." It was no wonder the crown princess was angry. The crown princess had just caused a ruckus at the Shi family's doorstep yesterday, forcing the Shi family to banish second young Mistress Shi. At night, some hooligans took turns to rape second young Mistress Shi. If news of this spread, perhaps everyone would secretly speculate that the crown princess was the one behind it. Even if they didn't dare to spread rumors, it would be detrimental to the crown princess' reputation. The crown princess had dealt with those ruffians in a particularly vicious manner. Firstly, she could convince people, and secondly, she could vent the anger in her heart. Our young crown prince consort is very proud and arrogant. You want to avenge her? That depends on whether our crown princess is willing to accept it or not. Kai Chi puffed up her cheeks. There are thousands of things in the world. The crown princess has her own set of principles. As servants, we should listen more and watch less and not interrupt. Kai Chi nodded, and the two of them pushed open the door and walked out. The crown princess dealt with the matter promptly. Those ruffians and hooligans were castrated that night and sent to the king of Jianpei's mansion. In the evening, the crown princess' righteousness spread through the streets. Once she made a move, she used thunderous methods to eliminate a few big gangsters who had been mingling in the neighborhood all year round. Getting rid of evil for the people, the crowd applauded and cheered. King Jianpei was so angry that he couldn't vent his anger. At that time, he took over those ruffians and hooligans with a dumbfounded expression. Even in the afternoon, he was still nagging about how the little crown princess treated his king of Jianpei's mansion like a garbage dump. She threw as much garbage as she wanted, which was simply infuriating to the old king of Jianpei. The crown prince of Jianpei persuaded the old king of Jianpei, "Little sister-in-law crown princess is filial," and sent a few people to serve father. "Father, please accept them." The old king of Jianpei was so angry that he almost spat a mouthful of blood on his son's face. "You shameless brat, since when did you address the crown princess as little sister-in-law respectfully?" Chapter 3541. After the little crown princess dealt with those ruffians in a thunderous manner, the rumors naturally didn't spread. On the other hand, Shi Yongqian had been locked up in that small, sealed room for more than 3 days now. In these 3 days, no one came to visit her. Shi Yongqian's days were getting more and more hopeless. She felt as if she had been forgotten by the entire world and that no one could remember her. Her heart was filled with deep hatred. She hated the heartlessness of her parents and brothers, and she also hated Arbor for causing her to be in this state. The only person she didn't hate was the second young master who ordered people to throw her into this small, sealed room. In her heart, she was still trying to find excuses for the second young master. The second young master must have been delayed by something these 2 days. Otherwise, he wouldn't have ignored her life and death. The funny thing was, the second young master she was trying to find excuses for was really so busy that he had forgotten about her and completely forgot about her. That evening, the iron door that had been sealed for 3 days and 3 nights finally made a sound. Shi Yongqian was both shocked and delighted. She scrambled to the side of the iron door and unwillingly slammed on the door again. In these 3 days, she was so hungry that she was dizzy. Ever since she became a cripple a few days ago, she couldn't take out the food that she had hidden in her inner world. So these few days, she was practically in an abyss of suffering. She was about to go crazy. Without food or water, her lips were so dry that they were cracked from thirst. But when the iron door opened and she saw the person standing at the door, a trace of disappointment involuntarily flashed across second young Miss Shi's heart. It wasn't the second young master. The person who came wasn't the second young master. Of course, it wasn't the second young master's bodyguard, Wang Cheng, but the master's right-hand man, Qin Chao. Qin Chao's pair of gloomy eyes stared at Shi Yongqian like a poisonous snake. He grinned and looked her up and down several times with ill intentions. I didn't expect that the second young miss of the Shi family would fall to such a state. Shi Yongqian's body couldn't help but shrink back. She opened her mouth, but she knew that she couldn't make a sound. She couldn't help but reach out her hand and gesticulate at Qin Grass. Qin Chao looked at her with a sneer. Suddenly, he pulled out a dagger from his waist and gave her a sinister smile. "Second miss, with your ruined body, you probably don't want to live in this world anymore. Since second miss is too scared to die, how about Qin Chao send you off?" With that, the man took a few steps forward with a cold face and kicked the small iron door shut. Shi Yongqian's eyes spat out flames of fear and panic. She stared at the man in front of her in disbelief. She pounded the ground twice with her hands and glared at Qin Chao as if she wanted to eat him up. Qin Chao had only taken a few steps when he suddenly stopped. His gaze fell on Shi Yongqian's exposed white calf, and he licked his lips. Shi Yongqian felt that she had experienced all kinds of filthy things in her life. At this moment, how could she not understand the meaning of the man's gaze? She shrank back in fear, her eyes revealing a bone-deep hatred. She leaned against the corner of the wall and kept kicking her legs, wanting to kick Qin Chao away. But she didn't expect Qin Chao to throw her away and pounce on her. He quickly tore apart the green robe covering her body and slapped the struggling Shi Yongqian hard across the face. Chapter 35-42. Slut, what are you hiding for? It's not like this is the first time. Who knows how many people have toyed with you before, so why pretend to be a pure and chaste woman? I toyed with you because I thought highly of you. I'll let you have a good time before you die. Qin Chao spat at her, then forcefully tore apart the clothes on her body. He sneered, "If you're obedient, you'll suffer less." Shi Yongqian silently sobbed, her fists forcefully pounding the man's shoulders. However, how could her soft fists be intimidating? Qin Chao pressed her to the ground with just a few hits, and began to use all his strength to torment her. "Little slut, who told you to mess things up? You're unlucky, and you almost implicated family head." Qin Chao slapped Shi Yongqian's face again. Shi Yongqian immediately collapsed to the ground like a pile of mud, unable to muster any strength in her body. She could only tilt her neck and allow herself to be manipulated, silently shedding tears. Her heart was naturally filled with regret and hatred. Half an hour later, a satisfied Qin Chao lifted his pants and stood up, kicking Shi Yongqian twice. He crooked his mouth, revealing a trace of a sinister smile. "What are you pretending to be dead for? It's not like you're a young lady in a bridal sedan chair. Once unfamiliar, twice familiar. You can only blame your own bad luck. If family head hadn't ordered for you to die, I would have kept you as a furnace. Although your cultivation has been crippled, there's still a bit of spiritual power in your meridians. Being a furnace isn't bad." Qin Chao cruelly licked his lips, then kicked Shi Yongqian again. "Little slut, if you don't beg me, perhaps I really can find a way out for you?" Bang! The small iron door was kicked open by someone with great force. Shi Yongqian turned her head. When she saw the pure white and elegant figure appear at the door, her entire body trembled. She hastily grabbed the messy weeds on the side and used them to cover her body. Second young master actually came at this time. Compared to the last time they met, she was in an even more sorry state. Why did second young master always have to see her in such a miserable state? Shi Yongqian couldn't help but burst into tears. Her throat made cracking noises due to her grief. Qin Xian coldly glanced at Qin Chao. Suddenly, her palm flew up and landed heavily on Qin Chao's face. Qin Grass was shocked. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. The slap was solid, leaving 5 bloody marks on his face. Second young master, what are you doing? Qin Grass's face immediately darkened, and he said angrily, although this servant is only a servant, I am still master's man. I warned you last time. Don't lay a hand on Miss Chiao. Qin Xian swung out another slap, landing squarely on Qin Grass' chest. Qin Grass couldn't withstand such a blow and spat out a mouthful of blood. Qin Xian stared coldly at the man in front of her. A black whip appeared in her hand and she lashed it at the man. The whip had barbs and hidden hooks, and it had been soaked in a special potion. After a person's skin was split open by the whip, the pain in their nerves would be magnified by several hundred times. It was so painful that they wanted to die, and their liver and guts were torn apart. Are all of you ignoring what this young master has said? No, it's not second young master. Qin Chao rolled back and forth on the ground from the whip. He continuously cried out in alarm. Second young master, spare me. Second young master. Chapter 35-43. Shi Yongqian, who was cowering in the corner, immediately relaxed her brows and couldn't hide her excitement and joy. Seeing the man who bullied her being tortured by the second young master to the point of begging for death, she instantly felt much better, so much so that she didn't even hear a single word of the second young master's reprimand. She deceived herself and others by thinking that the second young master acted this time to teach that lowly servant a lesson for her. That lowly servant actually dared to touch her, the second young miss of the Shi family. He deserved to be beaten to this state by the second young master. Hit the main point, hit the main point. Shi Yongqian wrapped herself in straw and cowered in the corner. When she looked at the second young master, her beautiful eyes were filled with deep adoration and excitement. She knew it, she knew that the second young master was extremely good to her. If he knew that she suffered so much here, he would definitely help her teach those lowly servants a lesson. And Arbor, that slut, the second young master definitely wouldn't let her off. She gazed tenderly at the Omega Kotoku young master, her eyes overflowing with dreamy colors. It was as if at this moment, Arbor was already kneeling in front of her, begging for mercy from the second young master's whip, kneeling and licking her. Qin Chao was tormented to death by the second young master's whip dipped in poison, suffering unbearably. He didn't expect that the second young master would not give his father any face and hit him without any hesitation. He was also so vicious to his father's servant. One had to consider the master's face before beating a dog, right? The second young master's actions were like a poisonous thorn being planted in Qin Chao's heart. As the whips fell one after another, the poisonous stinger quickly turned into a bramble, gradually growing and expanding. After a quarter of an hour, Qin Xian stopped. Looking at the mangled figure in front of her, she coldly said, "Throw him out." Wang Cheng immediately stepped forward and pulled up the kneeling Qin Chao. Qin Xian turned around and said coldly to Qin Grass, "Go back and tell my father that I'm going to kill him. I don't want to see this happen again." Old Master is also worried about the second young master. Qin Chao spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at Qin Xian with a resentful expression. "No need." Qin Xian coldly replied. "If you dare touch my people again, I'll take your lives next time." Qin Xian glanced at Qin Grass indifferently. The zither and grass quilt were dragged all the way out by Huang Chong and thrown into the flower bed of the garden like a dead dog. Shi Yongqian called out excitedly, but her expression suddenly froze. She can talk? She could talk all of a sudden? What's going on? The heavens must have pitied her and given her a chance to speak. Shi Yongqian was wild with joy as she rushed forward. She wanted to hug the corner of Qin Xian's robe, but he dodged to the side. The young master of the Omega Kotoku looked at the filthy Shi family's second daughter with disdain and said coldly, "Who told you to act on your own accord?" Shi Yongqian was stunned and quickly said, Xian, what are you saying? Who told you to take matters into your own hands and help my father go to Sikong planet to arrest the Chiao family members? A trace of grievance instantly filled Shi Yongqian's eyes, but she still carefully said, I did it willingly. I heard from Uncle that you were seriously injured in the lower star domain, and one of your clones was destroyed. Shi Yongqian's eyes suddenly widened as she stared at Qin Xan in disbelief. You're criticizing me? Chapter 35-44. Are you blaming me? Shi Yongqian couldn't help but shriek, Why are you blaming me? I'm helping you. Young Master Omega Kotoku's black whip immediately lashed out at Shi Yongqian's face. Shi Yongqian instantly felt a sharp pain on her face and all the hairs on her body stood on end. Second young master was whipping her? Pa! The whip mercilessly lashed out at Shi Yongqian's body several times. Shi Yongqian was in so much pain that she wanted to die. She had already gone through so many tragic events and her body and soul had suffered a huge impact. Now that she saw young Master Omega Kotoku mercilessly whipping her, she couldn't accept it emotionally and her heart was twisted. But, Shi Yongqian shrieked. Why was Xen treating her like this? What did she do wrong? Wasn't she helping Xen? Why was Xen whipping her like this? It was as if he wanted to whip her to death, again and again. It was no different from the violence he had done to Qin Chao just now. Shi Yongqian felt that her tears had almost dried up in the past 2 days. She couldn't shed any more tears and could only open her mouth and wail. Xen, why are you treating me like this? Xen. Qin Xen kept the whip in his hand and looked indifferently at the battered and blood-stained woman in front of him. A faint sense of satisfaction flashed through his eyes. So, when she was whipping Xiao Qiao, she also felt this happy? It turned out that whipping people was quite interesting. Shi Yongqian slightly raised her head. She had always worshipped and loved this man in front of her, so even when he was whipping her, she couldn't take her eyes off him and looked at him like she was crazy. Thus, Shi Yongqian didn't miss the flash of excitement in young Master Omega Kotoku's eyes. She shouldn't have loved such a cruel man. But the flame of love in her heart couldn't be extinguished and couldn't be suppressed. Even if he did such a terrible thing to her and treated her so cruelly, she still loved him wholeheartedly. As long as she could stay by this man's side, even if she was whipped every day, she didn't care. Shi Yongqian crawled forward a few steps and reached out to hook the corner of his robe, shouting, Xen, I love you, Xen, I really love you. I don't have any feelings for you. Qin Xen indifferently stretched his leg and kicked her. Every time I see you, I feel disgusted. Although his tone was calm, his words were like a sharp sword, cutting open Shi Yongqian's heart. If it wasn't because you hindered, I would have married you because how the Qin, speaking Katokut, you use he, he. Shi Yongqian cried out, but the infatuation in her eyes did not extinguish. The sudden she, her sir, es Kokuza's hers, her titu, you did this for Arbor? You did this to me for Arbor, didn't you? What did I do wrong? Isn't it enough that she caused me to be in this state? Chapter 35-45. Why Xen? Shi Yongqian pounded the ground as she wailed. Her face that was covered in whip marks was covered in blood and tears. There was no beauty to it at all. Instead, it caused the Omega Kotoku to have a look of disgust. He suddenly remembered that the little girl had also cried like this before. In a fit of anger, he had thrown her into the room and left her to fend for herself for over 10 days. When he came back, he saw that she had moved off the bed on her own. She was lying lifelessly on the ground with her face facing the sky. Tears that were like broken ice beads fell from her eyes drop by drop. She didn't make a sound or cry, but that kind of silent and broken cry made him feel inexplicably heartbroken in an instant. Her pearl-like tears were like broken pearls. At that time, it was as if they were smashed into his heart, making him feel unbearably uncomfortable. Qin Xian's eyes were cold as he once again stepped on Shi Yongqian's other arm. He slightly tilted his head as a sharp light flashed in his eyes. he softly said. Did you know? She didn't know how to walk before. But she never cried. When she was being whipped by you, she didn't even make a sound. If it wasn't for you, slut, obstructing us, how could we have reached that step? The Omega Kotoku became agitated as he spoke. He moved his foot and with two kaka sounds, his eyes were cold and cruel as he stepped on Shi Yongqian's two thighs. Shi Yongqian's head was covered in cold sweat as she let out a miserable cry. If it wasn't for you, calling her a cripple, how could she think of leaving me? Shi Yongqian's mouth was filled with blood as she looked at the man in front of her. The light in her eyes was extinguished bit by bit. Suddenly, it was as if she had a final radiance as her entire person brightened up. Did you know? The woman you're talking about, she is a talisman that cannot be allowed to exist in this world. Talisman? Cough. Talisman. Cough, cough, cough. Shi Yongqian's eyes were filled with horror as she wanted to reach out and claw at her burning throat. But when he raised his arm, he discovered that his arm was in great pain. It had long been crushed by Qin Xen, and he couldn't lift it at all. Talisman Master? Qin Xian's eyes were cold as she replied, I already knew. Shi Yongqian's eyes widened in shock. You slut, you're trying to harm her again. Qin Xen suddenly reached out and grabbed her by the neck, her eyes filled with bloodthirsty killing intent. In this life, I won't let you have the chance to hurt her again. Never. Cough, cough. Shi Yongqian felt her breathing tighten, and she was almost unable to say a word. She stared at him in confusion as she mumbled, how did they end up like this? It wasn't like this before. It wasn't like this. A cold teardrop slid down from the corner of Shi Yongqian's eyes. She suddenly realized that the curse words that the little crown princess had said by her ear seemed to have come true. That evil woman had said that she would die in the hands of the person she loved. That curse talisman had really taken effect. A cold light flashed in Qin Xian's eyes. His 5 fingers tightened around Shi Yongqian's neck as he watched her slowly lose her breath in his hands. A trace of pleasure flashed past his eyes. Chapter 3546. She was dead. This bitch who had been cruel to Jojo in his previous life and who had constantly prevented them from being together was finally dead. From now on, no one could stop his determination to get back Jojo. No one would ever be able to separate him from Jojo again. Boom! A loud tremor suddenly resounded through the clouds, waking up the entire imperial capital that was shrouded in darkness. All the citizens who had been sleeping peacefully jumped out of their beds, lit their lamps, and opened their windows. They looked at the night sky outside the window in shock. The sky to the east of Dragonflame City was completely dyed in a pure blue flame. Everyone looked at the scene in the distance in shock, feeling rather shocked in their hearts. Countless Xiozha flew out of their courtyards and rushed towards the Qin estate in the east. What happened to the Qin estate? The loud tremor just now came from the direction of the Qin estate. With such a terrifying tremor, the Qin estate's courtyard must have been damaged a lot. Kai Xiao got up and hurriedly pushed the door open to enter the little crown princess room. She saw that the little crown princess was still sleeping soundly. She had even turned over and pressed her entire body against the bedding, having a sweet dream. The crown princess' heart is really big. Kai Xiao's mouth twitched. She quickly closed the door and retreated, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. With such a big commotion outside, even a hibernating dragon would be awakened by the sound. The crown princess could actually sleep so soundly her heart ached for the crown prince. He must be very helpless to hug such a small piece of wood to sleep. During breakfast, Lady Jojo looked at them with a puzzled expression. She could not help but look at her parents, second uncle, second aunt, and the others. What's wrong? The little fellow stirred the porridge in his bowl and looked at his parents in confusion. Ahem. Second uncle coughed. Jojo, didn't you hear anything last night? Arbor's little hand paused and his little face immediately tensed. Did a thief enter the house? No. Second Uncle Qiao hurriedly waved his hand and said with a speechless expression, it wasn't a thief who broke into the house. There was a big commotion in the east of the city. In the middle of the night last night, the whole family woke up with a start. They put on their clothes and ran outside. Everyone met up in the garden. Even Xiaosun, the brat, ran out with them. Who knew, however, he did not see the little crown princess. Everyone anxiously ran to Pear Blossom Courtyard to look for the little crown princess, but Li told them that the crown princess was sleeping very well. Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Sir Jojo frowned. With a wave of his sleeve, a small tray ant appeared in his hand. "What did you do?" "Master, it's going to be summer soon. Cicadas and birds are chirping outside. It's very noisy. Master doesn't like to sleep on Paradise Planet. Then Qiuqiu can only help Master block out all sounds from the outside." Everyone's lips twitched. No wonder the little fellow didn't react to such a huge commotion last night. It turned out that Qiuqiu had secretly blocked out all sounds from the outside world. Arbor nodded his little head. Well done." Then he raised his hand and patted the little Trent's head, sending it back to Paradise Planet. "Sister, aren't you curious at all?" Little Xiao Xin bit on a chopstick and looked curiously at his sister. "Mother said that the explosion in the middle of the night yesterday blew up several houses in the east side of the Qin estate. What does that have to do with me?" Arbor scooped a bowl of soup with an indifferent expression. Chapter 3547. Stirring the spoon in the small bowl, Arbor picked up the small soup bowl and sipped it in small mouthfuls. When everyone saw her indifferent gaze, they assumed that she didn't want to ask too much about the Qin estate's family matters, so they smiled and didn't say anything. Xiao Sin mumbled something. Wei Ziqin smiled and rubbed Xiao Sin's head. "Meddlesome. How can we meddle in the affairs of those large clans? Some things can only be heard from others. Don't casually judge." "Oh." Xiao Sin pursed his lips and turned around to take the half piece of mantou from the little monk's bowl and stuffed it into his mouth. The little monk immediately scrunched up his bun-like face. "Benefactress's younger brother, why did you snatch this little monk's mantou? Snatching someone's food isn't the conduct of a gentleman." Xiao Sin lowered his head to look at the mantou in his hand, then glanced at the little monk. "Didn't I just eat a piece of your mantou? Why are you talking about a gentleman?" All right, Kong, there's more here." Madame Neyren didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she placed a small plate of mantou in front of the little monk. Only then did this nagging little fellow shut his mouth. Last night, the entire imperial capital was in turmoil and chaos. Because of the commotion caused by the Qin estate in the city's east, the imperial capital's patrol squads were all mobilized. Many of the Crimson Forest Guards and City Defense Army also went out. The Qiao family members didn't sleep well either. In the middle of the night, there was chaos outside. Moreover, they lived on Changle Street, which was closest to the imperial city, so the neighing of horses could be heard incessantly. There was nothing to do after breakfast, so Qiao Zhongbang and his wife, as well as second uncle and his wife, returned to their rooms to catch up on sleep. Qiao, who said with a smile, "Younger sister, Xiao Yao and I plan to go out for a walk. Do you want to come along?" Arbor shook her head. "I'll go in and cultivate for a while." "Okay." When Arbor returned to her Pear Blossom Courtyard, her expression abruptly changed the moment she stepped into her room. Without another word, she flicked her sleeve, and several bone-chilling lights shot toward the window. However, she saw a black figure suddenly enter through the window, and with lightning speed, he grabbed her small hand. "Let go." Arbor's cold voice sounded. It was as if a cold pearl had fallen into an icy river, revealing traces of coldness. "Xiao Qiao, you're really ruthless." A long sigh slowly sounded in her ears. The little stoic's expression chilled, and she slightly tilted her head. She gazed apathetically at the man who suddenly barged into the Pear Blossom Courtyard. "Do you really want me to die that badly? Qiao Qiao." He sighed again, his gaze fixed on her body. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly with an innocent expression that said, "I don't understand what you're talking about." His eyes looked back at him coldly. After a while, Mr. Omega Kotoku said, "Jojo, you're meticulous and calculative. No woman can compare to you." Arbor looked at him coldly and suddenly pulled his hand back. "You'd better get out of here. It's too late. No one knows what will happen." You know that the person who appointed Shi Yongqian will come to silence her, Mr. Omega Kotoku suddenly said. That's why the curse you cast on her will force Shi Yongqian's soul to self-detonate the moment she's about to die. Arbor turned his head and gazed deeply at him. Although this second young master didn't know what kind of vicious curse he cast on Shi Yongqian, his judgment could be considered accurate. However, there was one point Mr. Omega Kotoku didn't know. Chapter 3548. She didn't know that the one who secretly sent Shi Yongqian to Seekong planet to cause trouble was their Qin estate's patriarch. Now she knew. A glint of hatred flashed through Arbor's eyes. Family patriarch Qin had plotted to take her life time and time again. This time, he even indulged in the wildest of fantasies and wanted to secretly capture her family. With the old grudges added together, the enmity between her and the Qin estate would only deepen. Qin Exen, listen carefully. Arbor gazed at him coldly and said expressionlessly, what I cast on Shi Yongqian was a curse. I curse her to die in the hands of the person she loves the most. Arbor tilted his head slightly and looked at the man in front of him with sparkling eyes. The person Shi Yongqian loves the most is you. As expected, you didn't disappoint me. Don't say any more, don't say any more. Qin Exen seemed to have suddenly realized something. His expression was pained, and his handsome face contorted slightly. From beginning to end, what I want is not the life of the mastermind behind this. However, Arbor's voice was still so cold that it was a bit cruel. Don't say any more, all right? I beg you, don't say any more. Qin Xian's expression suddenly turned sinister as he roared angrily. Arbor retreated step by step and spat out 5 words with a cruel expression. It's your life. What a pity. As expected, the self-detonation of a cripple's soul is useless. She snorted coldly without any expression on her stoic face. As if to tell the person in front of her that she was really similar, she said coldly, don't think that your fake gentleness can move my heart. Do you think that we will still cross paths in this lifetime? Stop dreaming, all right? Let me put it this way. In the past, there was a silly and naive little girl who gave you all her reverence, and then her entire being was trampled to pieces by you. That feeling is already gone. Even if another 10 lifetimes pass, what's gone is gone. It won't happen again. Xiao Qiao, I know I was wrong in the past. But in this life, nothing has happened. Can you not always hold on to the past? Qin Xian's voice was slightly choked up, and her eyes were filled with shallow tears. It did happen. Arbor's eyes widened as he clenched his fists tightly. Unable to control the anger in his heart, he shouted, it all happened. Thus, you once rescued me from the dungeon. At that time, I was truly grateful to you. I even saw you as a life-saving rope that I encountered when I was wandering in the abyss of despair. What about you? What do you take me for? Do you need me to repeat to you how you treated me? You told me not to cling to the past, but what about you? Why can't you let it go? In this life, I only want to be strangers with you, Qin Exen. It's so simple. Can't you do it? Since you insist on pestering me again and again, I can only scheme to kill you. Jojo, I'm serious about you. The second young master clutched his chest in pain. He felt as if this place was being torn apart, and the torment was unbearable. Arbor suddenly turned to look out the window and swiftly leaped out. But she saw a bolt of lightning and fire streaking across the blue sky at an extremely fast speed, enveloping her with a whoosh. Jojo! Qin Xian's figure suddenly darted out of the window and pounced to her side. Chapter 3549. Lord Jojo did not expect Omega Kotoku to throw himself at her without any regard for his life. She subconsciously wanted to push him away, but who would have thought that this guy's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast enough to push her behind him? At the same time, the thunder fire had already smashed into the second young master's body with a thunderous rumble at the speed of lightning. Although Omega Kotoku had set up a defensive barrier around himself, the power of the thunder fire was not to be underestimated. It broke through his defensive barrier in an instant. Chi! A flame slowly burned on the back of his hand. Are you all right? Chin Exen lowered his head and glanced at Arbor. The latter was looking at him with a complicated expression. A faint light flickered in his icy jade-like eyes. Xiao Mu wanted to reprimand him, but when her gaze met his, she felt like she was unable to say anything. She turned her little head and faced Omega Kotoku with the back of her head. At the same time, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal stepped out of Paradise Planet. He reached out and grabbed the little fellow's wrist, pulling her to his side. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's sharp gaze swept over Omega Kotoku's body. His gaze paused slightly when he saw the faint traces of flames on his wrist. What's going on? When he was on Paradise Planet, he did not always pay attention to what was going on outside. Who would have thought that he would almost be scared to death by this little fellow? Why would there be a thunderfire in the sky out of nowhere? The young Crown Prince Consort's scowling little face was expressionless. The thunderfire in the sky was also very strange. After it struck down, it seemed to have been punched violently. It flew backward toward the ninth heaven. Above the blue sky, a faint shadow was left behind, and its tail was even twitching. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal studied the direction in which the thunderfire had flown and was speechless. What is this thunderfire for? Arbor said calmly, to strike me. That's right. When she cast the curse talisman, she knew that this talisman would definitely attract the flames of the heavenly Tao. What he didn't expect was that after Shi Yongqian's death last night, the lightning and fire had been delayed until now. Furthermore, this lightning fire was really just a casual strike. After a single strike, he ran away. How funny was this lightning fire? Arbor glanced at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was also looking down at her. Instinctively, he raised his hand and patted her head. With a serious expression, he said, "Jojo, don't do anything that will make us worry." Xiao Mu nodded her small head guiltily. She knew that cursed talismans weren't good things, but that day, she just wanted to be willful for once. That's right. Even if she had to suffer the pain of being burned by lightning and fire in the future, she still wanted to end it quickly. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glanced at her. Seeing that she was fine, he nodded and glanced at Chin Exen. Sir Omega Kotoku, it's not very appropriate for you to trespass on private property, is it? Chin Exen glanced at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and said indifferently, I'm looking for Jojo. Jojo doesn't seem like she wants to see you. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal sneered and looked Chin Exen up and down. Are you looking for trouble, second young master? Chin Exen ignored the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. She turned and stared deeply at Arbor. Then, she said indifferently, Little Qiao, although I can't reverse the past, I can control the future. I hope you believe me. Chapter 3550. From now on, nothing that harms you will ever happen again. I will also get rid of the people who have harmed you in the past. The little stoic was expressionless, and her entire body was like a small wooden stake. She stood there stiffly and said, No need. She would get rid of her enemies on her own. Why would she need his help? Moreover, she simply didn't need him to save her just now. Just look at how loud the lightning fire was and how weak the fire was. It was as crooked as a little bedbug. How could it burn her, Sir Jojo? This guy just had to interfere. Sir Jojo felt very uncomfortable in her heart after being protected by him. Her small face tensed up in displeasure and tensed up forcefully. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal glanced at her and couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. He waved his hand at Chin Exen and said, Jojo doesn't want to talk to you. Hurry and leave. Chin Exen wasn't angry and nodded. She looked at Arbor and said, I'm very sorry about the Qiao family. I will restrain them and won't let the servants find trouble with you again. Arbor glanced at him and humphed. She suddenly raised her hand and threw him a bottle of medicinal powder. Even if you didn't block it, I could still handle that lightning fire. The little fellow turned her head and pattered back into her room, grumbling impatiently, Meddlesome! Chin Exen glanced at the little fellow's back and gripped the medicinal bottle in her hand. Dong! He kicked the door shut. Sir Jojo turned around and glared at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal standing behind her. She rolled her eyes in exasperation. What are you doing? She sat down at the table. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal turned around, flicked aside a corner of his robe, and slowly sat down across from her. He propped up his chin with one hand and looked at her with a chuckle. What outrageous things did you do? Your relative couldn't hold himself back and ran over to warn you? Arbor pursed her small lips and didn't say a word. Sigh, it looks like I can't get you to reveal the truth. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal took out a jade messenger talisman from his inner world and pretended to draw with a talisman pen. How should I write it? Jojo was naughty. Jojo was struck by lightning. Hurry up and come back to discipline your wife. Arbor glared at him a few times and raised his hand to grab the jade talisman. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal turned his hand over and pressed down on her small hand. The playful expression on his face faded slightly as he said sternly, Jojo, no matter when or where, don't punish yourself for others. Is that okay? Arbor looked at his serious eyes, bit his lips, and nodded reluctantly. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal laughed and flicked her head. Hey, you promised me. Speaking of which, was it really the curse that attracted the divine punishment? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal asked with a smile. Xiao Mu subconsciously nodded her small head. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's smile deepened. Before you used that talisman, you already knew that you would incur divine punishment. A faint desire to live ignited in Arbor's heart. Then she shook her head forcefully. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal smiled. Aren't you going anywhere these few days? How about going to the fish orchid planet to cultivate? Arbor nodded. She felt that it was best not to court death at this time. She felt that the man in front of her seemed to be a little angry. Oh, Jojo won't use the cursed talisman in the future, right? Arbor nodded but couldn't help muttering inwardly, I'll try my best. You're not fooling me, are you? Chapter 35:51. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal suppressed his smile and coughed lightly. He looked at the young lady in front of him seriously and said, I didn't say that I wouldn't tell you. I'm just looking at the situation. Should I plead for leniency on your behalf? Arbor, exclamation point. I'll tolerate you. Resisting the urge to beat him up, Lord Jojo snorted and jumped into Fish Orchid Planet. She planned to listen to Rotten Peach Blossom and cultivate in peace for a few days. These few days, she frequently entered a state of epiphany. She had a feeling that she was about to make a small advancement again. She should cultivate obediently so that she wouldn't have to wander around outside and be disturbed by all sorts of things. Before Arbor entered Fish Orchid Planet, he deliberately placed a few demonic eyes around the Qiao residence. This way, even if something happened outside, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the rest would be able to detect it immediately. However, he reckoned that nothing would happen at the Qiao residence in the near future. After all, the little crown princess had just used the Sher family to establish her authority. As long as one wasn't a fool, no one would pick a time like this to provoke the little crown princess. The carriage stopped at the entrance of the Qiao residence. A slender figure came out of the carriage. Holding the hand of a young maidservant, she slowly walked out of the carriage and raised her head to look at the lintel of the Qiao residence. Bam bam. The servant girl went forward and knocked on the door, but there was no sound of the door opening. She turned back and exchanged a look with the lady. Miss, this family doesn't seem to be home? The lady's eyes flashed. She took a few steps forward and knocked on the door a few more times. Miss, shouldn't we send a visiting card first? Let them know that Miss is coming to the Qiao residence to visit the crown princess, the servant girl said with a frown. Who was her miss? She was a famous god-level alchemist in the 3 continents. She had lowered herself to visit the Qiao residence but was rejected at the door. Single-clothed Sue smiled and patted her hand. Then she looked up at the Qiao residence's plaque and said with a smile, We have nothing to do anyway. There's no harm in waiting. When the little girl heard this, she immediately curled her lips in displeasure. Miss, you really have a good temper. With your status, no matter where you go, they will welcome you with open doors, the little girl muttered. Only the Qiao family doesn't take you seriously. Shan Yi Su shook her head with a smile. If we come here abruptly, no one will know. It's fine to wait. Thus, the master and servant got back into the carriage and waited until the evening came. The little girl puffed up her cheeks and said indignantly, "This family is really too much. It's been so long, and even a servant doesn't come out to buy groceries?" Shan Yi-su also felt very strange, so she led the little girl out of the car and knocked on the door of the Chiao residence. This time, they didn't have to wait for long before the door was pulled open. A yawning manservant appeared at the entrance of the Chiao residence. He blinked his dog eyes and looked curiously at the master and servant pair. "Ladies, who are you looking for?" The little girl immediately shouted in dissatisfaction, "Our family's alchemist Shan is here to visit the crown princess." That manservant sized them up again and made a comical "oh" sound. Then he prepared to close the door. "The crown princess is not seeing guests recently." The little girl was about to explode in anger. She pushed that manservant. "Hey, didn't you hear what I said? Why did you close the door? Why are you pushing people?" The manservant said unhappily. Chapter 35-52. Our pill master Dan has been waiting until now. Why aren't you hurrying to inform him? Why are you wasting time with us? The page boy became even more displeased. "Who are you? Do you have a visiting card? I already said that our crown princess is not seeing any guests recently." The little girl's eyes widened angrily, revealing an expression of disbelief. "This is the famous Dan Pill Master in our 3 prefectures. How many people are looking forward to begging our pill master? You actually. She was so angry that she was at a loss for words. However, Shan Yi-su tugged at her sleeve and said to the little girl, "All right, Mei-lan, don't be angry with this little brother. We have an important matter to discuss with your crown princess today. Please inform her." The page boy glanced at her and shook his head, saying, "The crown princess said that she is not seeing any guests recently." After saying that, he slammed the door shut with a bang. Mei-lan was so angry that she could not help but curse. "Haven't I seen such an arrogant page boy in a rich family? Miss, look at him. He clearly just woke up. Which page boy would sleep until the evening before waking up? He still dares to be so unruly towards you. Just now, this servant should have slapped him twice." Shan Yi-su sighed and shook her head, saying, "Forget it. Since the crown princess does not wish to see us, there is no need for us to disturb her." Mei-lan stomped her feet. "This family is really unruly. No wonder their page boy is like this. He caused Miss to wait under the scorching sun for so long. He simply deserves to die. Miss, you should not have come. You're asking for trouble. I was thinking that His Highness the Crown Prince's safety was worrying, so I wanted to give some advice to the Crown Princess." Shan Yi-su sighed softly. In Paradise Planet, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was sitting on a tree branch with half a pot of wine in hand, swaying back and forth as he watched everything outside. "Hey, why is this show not over yet?" He sighed and poured himself another cup of wine. "What a pity. My JoJo is in seclusion and can't see such a lousy show." The little tray ant stood on his shoulder and waved 2 branches, saying, "Venerable Immortal, what's there to pity about this? Master definitely won't be interested in this show." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal blinked. With a flick of his sleeves, he leaped down from the tree. "I'm not looking anymore. Let's go see how JoJo's training is going." Outside, after Mei-lan helped Shan Yi-su into the carriage, she couldn't help but mutter a few words. "Miss, are we going back to the manor now?" A cold light flashed across San Yi-su's eyes. She shook her head and said, "No, let's go out of the city now." "Leave the city?" Maidservant Mei-lan cried out in surprise. My lotuses section break. Before his eyes was an expanse of a crimson-yellow sea of sand. Sand dunes of high and low, rocks that rose and fell, and as far as the eye could see, it was a vast expanse of desolate sand. Mo Lien brought a total of 60,000 troops with her on this trip. The army had set up camp here 2 days ago. When they first arrived, Mo Lien couldn't help but be stunned when she saw the scenery of Greyfield Village. She had originally thought that this was just an ordinary small village. She didn't expect that this village was actually backed by a vast expanse of desolate sand. These 2 days, she had studied it with Third Fu and the others who had followed the army, but they couldn't figure out the reason. Where did this vast expanse of desolate sand come from? It was said that this place was still fine a month ago. Greyfield Village and several other villages nearby formed a town. One day a month ago, they were attacked by the desolate sand at the same time. Chapter 35:53. Such a large area of sand had only appeared in the Aurora Desert outside Qingyue City. How could this village, which was originally in good condition, be buried by the sand? According to the villagers, the sandstorm came abruptly, and several villages were buried by the sand. The nearby villagers had no choice but to swarm towards Huiping Village. Huiping Village managed to survive because it was on a higher ground. It was said that the sand covered the sky and covered all the nearby villages. It flowed for 2 days and 3 nights before it stopped. However, whether it was the nearby streams or the fields, they were all buried under the barren sand. Just as the villagers of these villages were helplessly preparing to move, many zombies suddenly emerged from the sand and began to crazily claw and bite people. The villagers were not prepared at first, and many of them were hit. Those who were hit gradually changed in the crowd, injuring even more people. Therefore, in these villages, other than a small group of villagers who were smarter and survived, the rest all became zombies. This was something that could not be helped. After all, no one knew that these monsters would breed more monsters. Huiping Village was a small village that could not be found on the map of the Divine Lands. The villagers usually did not care about what was happening outside and lived their lives peacefully. Who knew that the outside world had already given birth to such a terrifying creature as zombies? The villagers had also slowly learned how to protect themselves during the battle. The remaining 1,000 villagers could be said to be a group of people who were more capable of fighting. A small number of them had even gained special abilities from their misfortune, and they were still adapting to their new abilities. Third Fu opened the curtain and came in. He patted the dust off his body and shook his head. It seems like the wind is blowing again outside. An old-fashioned man standing behind Prince Mo looked out of the tent when he heard that. Your Highness, we can't go on like this. If we can't think of a good countermeasure and can't kill all the zombies in one blow, our people won't be able to take it if we continue to fight them like this. Not only will our people not be able to take it, we won't be able to keep up with our food. Especially in this kind of broken environment where yellow sand filled the sky, the wind and sand were strong, eating dust and dirt every day, people would be in a bad mood. You don't have to worry about food and water, Mo Lien said indifferently. Fong Su, none of the people who went to investigate nearby have returned. The man with an old-fashioned face and a very serious expression nodded when he heard this. They are all waiting outside. Your Highness wants to see them now. Mo Lien nodded. Let them in. He needed to know how many undead puppets were hidden in the nearby desert. First, he had to figure out their numbers and then formulate a plan to deal with them. What Fong Su said was also somewhat reasonable. These damn things, they had to be annihilated in one blow. It was best to end the battle quickly. Your Highness! Your Highness! How dare you? How dare you trespass into the main tent? Who gave you the guts? The guard's angry shout came from outside. No, little brother, I have something to discuss with His Highness. I want to report that bastard Wang Dongping for hiding his sister's zombie. He wants to kill everyone in our village. A sharp cry rang out from outside the tent. Chapter 35:54. A middle-aged skinny man with a pointy mouth, monkey-like cheeks, and rolling eyes was pushed into the tent from outside. His face was bruised and swollen, as if he had been beaten up. Other than Fu San and Fong Su, there were a few other soldiers in the tent. When they saw this person's strange face, they couldn't help but snicker. That person looked like a lackey. When he saw Prince Mo sitting in the middle of the tent, he quickly knelt down and prostrated himself on the ground. He flatteringly said, "This lowly one greets Your Highness the Crown Prince. You're making a ruckus in the army. Do you know what punishment you deserve?" Mo Lien's handsome face was cold as he asked in a light voice. That person jumped in fright and quickly raised his head and stammered, Your Highness, this lowly one didn't do it on purpose. This lowly one is really, really angry. That Wang Dongping has bad intentions. He secretly raised his corpse puppet sister in the tent. Your Highness, this lowly one is called Wang Sheng. Every word I said is true. I hope Your Highness can judge clearly. Mo Lien looked at this person with a heavy gaze and waved his hand lightly. A soldier immediately cupped his hands and left. For a moment, the tent was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Wang Xing was so scared that he knelt on the tip of a needle. His body couldn't help but tremble slightly. Not long after, Wang Dongping and a short woman were brought in one after another. When the two siblings saw so many people in the tent, they didn't panic. Instead, they calmly knelt down at the same time and bowed. This lowly one greets Your Highness. Your Highness, it's him. His sister Wang Dongsue's arm was torn by a corpse puppet. This grandson hid his sister in the tent and didn't report it. Sooner or later, he will harm all of us. Your Highness, it's not like that. I have a way to control the corpse poison in my sister's body. I can guarantee that she won't mutate in the near future. Wang Dongping suddenly raised his head and said in a deep voice, The corpse poison can be controlled, Your Highness. Bullshit. Wang Sheng was about to refute when Mo Lien coldly interrupted him. Let him continue. Wang Sheng resentfully shut his mouth. Wang Dongping looked up and said, This commoner is an apothecary. After the medicinal efficacy leveled up, I realized that it could help my sister control the corpse poison within her arm. As long as the corpse poison doesn't spread throughout her body and enter her head, my sister will be able to maintain her consciousness and won't undergo corpse transformation. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but look warily at the Wang siblings. Mo Lien looked at the brother and sister deeply. After a while, she nodded and signaled to the two soldiers standing at the side with her eyes. The two soldiers stepped forward and pulled up Wang Dongsue's sleeves. The wound on Wang Dongsue's left arm was purplish-black, and the rotten flesh had been removed. Although the wound was difficult to heal, it could be seen that the injury was indeed under control. The surrounding skin was normal. Do you think pharmacists are amazing? Wang Sheng cursed. Pharmacists aren't omnipotent. Even if your sister doesn't turn into a zombie today, can you guarantee that she won't turn into a zombie in a month or 3 months? I want to separate you and your sister from the others. Do you have any objections? Mo Lien said indifferently. Your Highness the Crown Prince. Wang Sheng became anxious when he heard this. What was wrong with His Highness? Wang Dongke was about to turn into a zombie, but he didn't kill her and only isolated her? Shut up. Fong Su berated. Chapter 35-55. After being reprimanded, Wang Sheng's heart jumped in fright, but he still couldn't stop himself from muttering, This is what it is. For things like corpse puppets, if we don't kill them now, if she acts up and goes crazy in the tent area, it will harm many people. His Highness has his own considerations, you don't need to say more about this. Fong Su glared at the monkey-cheeked man with dissatisfaction, then casually ordered the guard beside him, Take him out. Wang Sheng was pushed out in a flustered and exasperated manner. For a moment, the tent was very quiet. Everyone looked at the kneeling Wang Dongping and his sister with a strange gaze. How long have you been controlling her? At this moment, Mo Lien asked. Wang Dongping was apprehensive. He looked up at the handsome man in black armor sitting in the center of the tent and stammered twice. Then he gathered his courage and said, From the first day she was attacked by the corpse puppet until today, it has been about 5 or 6 days. Her arm has always been like this? Wang Dongping nodded. Previously, my sister's arm was shrouded in black qi, then, after this commoner used medicine to control her, the black qi also disappeared a lot. Mo Lien nodded indifferently, then waved her hand. 2 soldiers walked over and invited the brother and sister out. Wang Dongping and his sister didn't have much confidence in their hearts. They looked at each other, then entered a tent with fear and trepidation. Looking out from a small window, there were 4 guards standing guard outside the tent. It seems that they were really isolated. Big brother, will something happen? Wang Dongzui was silent for a moment and said, "Don't worry, Dongte, since His Highness the Crown Prince didn't make things difficult, it means that he believes what I said before." At the same time, in the tent, several young generals were puzzled. One of them stepped forward and said, "Your Highness, although that person suppressed the corpse puppet poison in his sister's body. But we don't know if it's true." That's right, Your Highness. If we leave that girl in the tent area, will she?" Mo Lien said faintly. "We will go take a closer look at it later." What he didn't say was that he had previously suspected that medicine could control corpse poison. Now, it seemed that one had to reach the level of an advanced apothecary to have any effect on corpse poison. However, there were truly very few apothecaries in the world, and that Wang Dongping was a rare talent. "Does Your Highness want to take that Wang Dongping for your own use?" Third Fu frowned. "Wang Dongsui's rights? He's right. That's right. Several young generals nodded in agreement. "His Highness's rights, right? His Mo Lien swept them a glance. "We know what to do. Go summon." His Huifeng handed the teacup to him and said quietly, "Your Highness, someone from the night pavilion delivered news about the crown princess." Mo Lien glanced at the message Huifeng delivered and flipped it open to read, a hint of a smile on her face. As expected, his wife hadn't been idle. "Greetings to Your Highness the Crown Prince." A group of men who had gone to the desert to investigate corpse puppets filed in and saluted. Mo Lien pressed down the paper in her hand and looked up at them. "Everyone, tell me about the nearby situation." Chapter 3556. In the ocean of Fish Orchid Star, countless islands rose and fell. Arbor was cultivating on one of these quiet islands, and no one disturbed him for the past few days. After she opened her eyes, she first used her divine perception to sense the surrounding islands. Her younger sister, Jolin, was practicing the usage of water spirit on the neighboring island. Fairy Yellow Crane had successfully refined a cauldron of Earth-grade pills, and officially stepped into the ranks of Earth-grade pill refiners. She was currently dancing with joy on the small island. "Yellow Crane, do you want to follow this lord out of the island?" Yellow Crane was also quite pitiful. Ever since she was thrown onto the island, she had been concentrating on refining pills for so long. Her mouth was probably bland at first. Fairy Yellow Crane thought she was hallucinating. 3 seconds later, she jumped up and shouted, "Yes. Oh, Lord Xiao Xiao finally remembered that he was the one who was refining pills on this island where birds don't shit and chickens don't lay eggs. It really wasn't easy." Fairy Yellow Crane took a deep breath, then turned her head to look back and forth. She couldn't help but shout, "Jojo, where are you?" "I'm on the island next to you. Far away." The little fellow's faint voice floated into her ears, inexplicably making Fairy Yellow Crane feel that it was as pleasant as the sound of nature. "Then when are we going out?" "Anytime." Lord Jojo blinked and made Chiochio grab Fairy Yellow Crane from the pill refining island to his side. The scene in front of them instantly changed. When Yellow Crane was caught by Chiochio, she was still hugging her medicine cauldron. When she saw Arbor standing in front of her, she was so excited that she even threw away her medicine cauldron and stretched out her arms to hug Arbor. "Jojo." Arbor pinched his nose with one hand and retreated a few steps. His little eyes were somewhat disdainful as he looked her up and down. "Why you so smelly again?" Fairy Yellow Crane raked her messy hair and chuckled. I got busy and forgot to take a bath, hee." With that, Fairy Yellow Crane suddenly felt her body lighten. She was wrapped up by a vine and thrown into the sea to soak in it. After Huang He finished washing up and changing into clean clothes, she hopped ashore. The little stoic, who was wearing a purple robe and had her long hair held up by a jade hairpin, was already waiting for her on the beach. "Jojo." Yellow Crane Fairy insisted on giving Jojo a hug of love. Jojo-sama expressed his helplessness. Everyone she met liked to give her a hug. Sigh. She was so pretty that even the heavens were jealous of her beauty. As she thought, her small hand involuntarily stroked her little stoic face, and she turned to look at the grinning fairy Huang He. "Huang He, congratulations on becoming an Earth-grade alchemist." "Ha ha ha." Fairy Yellow Crane immediately had a smug look on her face. She could not help but laugh with her hands on her hips. Jojo-sama felt that he had praised him wrongly. While the two people were talking, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal dashed over in a faintly discernible red robe. He examined Xiaomu from head to toe before commenting with a smile. Not bad. Although you only advanced by 2 small realms, it looks like your cultivation has consolidated a lot more than before. Arbor was naturally quite satisfied. Although he only skipped gradual attainment this time and entered the initial success stage of a level 13 Great Spiritualist. But just as the Peach Blossom said, his cultivation had consolidated a lot more than before. Fairy Yellow Crane pulled her small hand and said, Jojo, I still need a few ingredients to refine the Earth Grade Breakthrough Spirit Pill. It's fine. We'll talk after we get out. Chapter 3557. The ingredients should be available in the herb garden on Paradise Planet. It wouldn't be troublesome for Sapling to pluck them. Arbor pulled Fairy Yellow Crane away from Fish Orchid Planet. She planned to have Yellow Crane guide the small pill refiners in the Heavenly Pill Auction. She told Fairy Yellow Crane about her idea, and Yellow Crane naturally agreed. She said that staying in Fish Orchid Planet's 12-fold flow of time was equivalent to living alone for several years. Little Yellow Crane wanted to go to a crowded place right now. The two were talking in the room when Wei Zichin's voice came from outside. It turned out that Wei Zichin had been coming to the Pear Blossom Courtyard frequently these 2 days. However, she knew that her daughter had gone to the Stellar Domain to cultivate, so she only came to take a look before leaving. Now that she heard voices coming from the room, she called out to her daughter. Arbor opened the door and welcomed her mother in. She introduced Fairy Yellow Crane and said a few words. Li Ye's figure suddenly appeared at the door. Crown Princess, the Yi Pavilion sent news. Arbor raised her brows. She knew Li Ye's character. She wouldn't bother her at such a time unless it was something extremely important. Thus, she nodded and let her in. Li Yi handed the message to Arbor and said with a strange expression, It's news about that God-grade pill refiner, Shan Yi-su. Arbor was slightly taken aback. That God-grade pill refiner shouldn't have anything to do with her. Why would Li Yi specially pass this news to her at such a time? Puzzled, Arbor lowered her head to read the message. There were only a few lines on the paper, but Arbor's expression turned cold. A few days ago, when that pill refiner left the capital, our people didn't pay much attention to her. However, we discovered that her route was becoming more and more similar to the army's. We couldn't help but be curious. Li Yi pursed her lips, her expression carrying a hint of mockery. As expected, she's following the path of His Highness the Crown Prince's group. Calculating the time, she should be near the army's encampment, Grey Ping Village. Wei Zichin was astonished and couldn't help but interrupt. Which pill refiner? Why did she follow Murphy to Huiping Village, which was so far away? Could it be that the great emperor sent her to assist Xiaomo? No. His Majesty was not that bored. There are alchemists and pharmacists in the army. We don't lack anything, Arbor said coldly. She went there on her own accord. His motive was obvious. He wanted to make his presence known in front of Jojo's Ren. Previously, Jojo's Lotus had already firmly rejected this woman from following the army. Who would have thought that she would be so bold as to follow them all the way? Crown Prince Consort, should we send someone over to teach this woman who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth a lesson? Li Yi asked expressionlessly with a taut face. Wei Zichin looked at her and then at her daughter's stoic face. Inexplicably, he felt that this master and servant pair were actually what a perfect fit. His daughter was already expressionless. Why did he send another expressionless shadow guard to her? There's no need for us to do anything. Arbor shook his head indifferently. In any case, Jojo's Ren would teach this self-righteous fellow a good lesson. The little fellow suppressed a small fire in her heart as she stood up with a taut face. Disgraceful thing, she thought that she was chasing after her husband from 1,000 miles away. She actually dared to chase after Jojo's Ren for no reason. Oh right, that pill refiner Dan even came to look for the Crown Princess previously, Li suddenly said. Did she? Wei Zichin was bewildered. Chapter 3558. Yes. Li Yi expressionlessly said, that day, everyone went to catch up on sleep after eating breakfast. They slept the entire afternoon and only woke up very late to eat. That did seem to be the case. It was the day after the Qin estate was bombed, right? Wei Ziqin thought for a moment before nodding. It should be the day Jojo went into closed-door cultivation. Arbor humph. She must be exaggerating to scare me. Li Yi nodded. Crown Princess, then we're just going to let her chase him into the army? And disturb His Highness? Arbor pursed her lips. We have to see Jojo's lotus first. Wei Ziqin smiled as she grasped her daughter's hand. Alright, Jojo, let's not talk about this. Let's go eat. You were in closed-door cultivation for so long, but you didn't even get to drink a sip of soup. The mother and daughter pair called for the little yellow crane to leave the room. At the same time, 500 kilometers away, at the army's encampment in Huiping village, Hui Feng blocked the two women with a smile and said with an indifferent gaze, apologies, His Highness is currently discussing matters with several generals in the tent, so it's not convenient for him to receive Alchemist Dan. Alchemist Dan, please return. St. Claude Su stood in front of Hui Feng. Her servant girl was following behind her, holding a bowl of something. It looked like she was here to deliver a tonic to His Highness. Hui Feng swept a glance at the stew bowl, but he still blocked St. Claude Su with a beaming smile. St. Claude Su wasn't angry and nodded very politely at Hui Feng. Little brother, since His Highness is busy with official business, then I'll have to trouble little brother to deliver this bowl of snow lotus seed soup to His Highness. Hui Feng glanced at her with a spurious smile and shook his head. Apologies, Alchemist Dan. His Highness's diet is specially prepared by a physician. For safety reasons, he can't casually consume food from outside. Please forgive me, Alchemist Dan. St. Claude Su's smiling face stiffened slightly. She didn't say anything, but the little girl behind her, Mei Lan, couldn't help but shout, Hey, how can you say that? Are you saying that our Alchemist Dan will poison the snow lotus seed soup? Mei Lan. Single Claude Su scolded softly. Not only did these words not make Mei Lan shut up, but it also aroused the little girl's anger like a mother hen protecting her chicks. Mei Lan held the tray and stomped over to the single-robed Su, wishing for nothing more than to throw the tray at Hui Feng. How dare you be so rude to our young miss? Mei Lan shouted in exasperation, This is a soup that our miss personally made with fresh snow lotus. Hui Feng couldn't help rolling his eyes. Was there something wrong with this master and servant pair? If he dared to send this bowl of soup in today, the news of the night pavilion would be delivered to the Crown Princess tomorrow, and he would not be able to live a good life. Besides, perhaps before the little Crown Princess took his life, the Crown Prince had already found him an eyesore and slapped him to death. He simply didn't want face when he was given it, and insisted on playing the role of bad cop. Hui Feng was just about to harshly reprimand this master and servant pair with a stern expression. On the other side, third young master Fu lifted the curtain and stood at the entrance with a spurious smile. I was wondering who it was. So it's Alchemist Dan. Third Fu curled his lips and cast an indifferent glance at Single Claude Su. Interesting. This woman actually chased him all the way to Greyfield Village and now wanted to enter his room and enjoy the benefits of being in a favorable position. Did she really think that the little fiend in the capital was just a decoration? Third Fu couldn't help but shake his head. As expected, this alchemist Dan before him was very bold and skilled. Chapter 3559. However, with her reputation as a god-level alchemist, it was true that a large group of cultivators would flock to her like a flock of ducks. It was no wonder that she was so fearless in doing things. She looked smart, but the way she did things was rather out of line. Third Fu shook his head again. Alchemist Shan, His Highness hopes that if you have time, you can help the commoners in the commoner district. They were hungry a while ago, so please help them check on their stomach and intestines, and see if they have any injuries. Okay. Shan Yi Su nodded gently and agreed. Third young Master Fu, please tell His Highness not to worry. Shan Yi Su will definitely do her best to help him. Third Fu did not correct him. He simply nodded and went back into the tent. In any case, he could just send her far away. As for the diagnosis, let her be. If she was willing, then she could help the military doctors. If she was unwilling, then it was fine. There were enough alchemists and doctors in the military anyway. Miss, why are you so easy to talk to? If not for the fact that the soup in her hand was precious, Mei Lan, the little maid beside Shan Yi-su, would really want to smash this bowl of soup. Her miss had worked hard to make this soup, but His Highness the Crown Prince did not appreciate it at all. It must have been hard for Miss to be so good-natured and not be angry at all. She actually agreed to that third young Master Fu's words and ran over to treat those dirty commoners? What kind of joke was this? Mei Lan, who followed Shan Yi-su to the commoners' resting area, had a disdainful expression on her face. This commoners' resting area was still a short distance away from the army's encampment. Before His Highness the Crown Prince had arrived, the remaining commoners had used the local materials, rocks, and sand to build a circle of low earth walls around them. The small earth walls barely reached the women's waists. If they huddled behind the sand walls, they could at least shelter themselves from the wind and sand. If he wanted to resist the corpse puppet, he could forget about it. There were also people who built a few holes behind the small mud wall, which could allow the children and the weak women to hide in. The environment was harsh, and food was scarce. After so many days of fierce fighting, these people's bodies were already exhausted. If His Highness the Crown Prince had not led the army over and temporarily blocked the waves of zombies outside, perhaps the remaining people would have already been eaten by the zombies. Hey, it's so dirty. When Mei Lan passed by a child who was sitting outside the sand wall and looking at her with dull eyes, she waved her hand twice and covered her nose with a look of disgust. The woman beside the child hurriedly hugged her child and looked at them warily. Sue didn't seem to mind the dirt. She squatted down and didn't care about the mint green long skirt. It dragged on the ground and was dusty from the sand. Is your child a little feverish? I noticed that his complexion doesn't seem right. Give me your hand. Shan Yi-su smiled gently. That smile made the woman holding the child let down her guard a little, and she handed the child's hand to Shan Yi-su. After Shan Yi-su took the child's pulse, she smiled and said, "It's nothing serious. Let the child take this cold and heat pill, and he will be fine after a while." The woman took it suspiciously and watched the pretty woman leave. Sue led Mei Lan, who was pouting and complaining, to stroll around the civilian district. She specifically picked 2 or 3 children to look at before leading Mei Lan back to her own tent. Chapter 3560. Alchemist Dan strolled around the resting area twice and checked on the 3 children. They were only suffering from a lack of water and food, and their bodies were a little unwell. There weren't any major issues, so she went back. Dark Current was sitting at a table on the side, not looking proper either. He was currently telling Prince Mo about the scene he saw when he followed Dan Isu. After saying a bunch of things, he even pursed his lips in disdain when he was done. She really can't compare to our Crown Princess Consort's eagerness for success and instant benefits. If the Crown Princess was here, she would have finished diagnosing those children and women long ago, and she would have even distributed the medicine. Hui Feng irritably glared at him and patted his head with his paw. She's not worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as the Crown Princess. Dark Current kicked off the table and said with a grin, "Your Highness, why don't you let this subordinate pretend to be a zombie and scare those 2 irritating fools away?" Hui Feng rolled his eyes. "You've really gotten addicted to pretending to be a zombie back on Seekong Planet, haven't you? Heh, don't tell me that I scared Consort Zheng so much that she couldn't get out of bed for half a month when I showed up in front of her." Mo Lien coughed lightly and set down the cup in her hand. She looked at him seriously. That was because this highness was young and frivolous. Everyone, they didn't see this lord being that old and steady now. Thankfully, the emperor of the divine province wasn't as muddle-headed as the old great king of the Mo kingdom. Otherwise, wouldn't he have ended up being tricked by you? Let's go to the commoners area to take a look. Mo Lien couldn't be bothered with these brats and got up to walk out of the tent. The group had just arrived at the commoners area when they were surrounded by a group of excited commoners who knelt and kowtowed to them. After seeing the reinforcements brought by Prince Mo, The emotions that they had been suppressing for the past few days were all released. Right now, their hearts were full of reverence for His Highness the Crown Prince of the Divine Province, who was like a divine soldier descending upon them. Mo Lien raised his hands and pressed them down slightly. Only then did the clamor quieten down slightly. Give everyone the food and water first. Mo Lien turned around and ordered. Hui Feng nodded and immediately led his men to the side. A storage talisman popped out of his hand, and a moment later he took out a large pile of food and water and had his subordinates distribute them to everyone. The adults could hardly believe what they were seeing when the children grabbed the winter fruit and started to chew on it. His Highness the Crown Prince actually brought such a sumptuous spread of food and fruits. Thank you, Your Highness. If you hadn't brought people to save us, I really don't know what would have happened. I am Wang Yifu, the village chief of Huiping Village. Thank you for your generous assistance. Mo Lien glanced at him. Village Chief Wang was probably one of those people who had awakened a strength-type special ability. Although his face was gray, he seemed to be in good spirits. Miss, His Highness the Crown Prince brought some people to distribute food and fruits in the civilian area. Shan Yi Su, who was leaning on the short table, was stunned for a moment before he quickly stood up. Let's go out and have a look. If she had known that His Highness the Crown Prince valued those lowly commoners so much, she would have stayed there. Alchemist Dan was secretly vexed. On the other side, Arbor, who was far away in Dragonflame City, received another letter from family head Mu. This time, the letter mentioned that it had been some time since the last clan competition. An Chaoyang Pavilion was open for business within a month after the competition. If Arbor still didn't return to the Mu residence, it would be equivalent to forfeiting the competition. This was a blatant threat. Chapter 3561. Arbor slapped the letter on the table and jumped up from the stool. What kind of joke was this? The Chaoyang Pavilion award belonged to her in the first place, so she naturally couldn't just let it go like this. It wasn't like she was afraid of the Mu family and didn't dare to return. She just didn't want to go back and play those schemes with them. Crown Princess, that messenger manservant is still waiting outside for your reply. Kai Chi pursed her lips and couldn't help but grumble. He really didn't give up. In order to obtain the Crown Princess's reply, he would rather stand outside under the scorching sun and wait. Arbor's little face instantly tensed up, and she said in displeasure, Go and reply to him. Tell him that I will return tomorrow. Tell him that he doesn't need to wait outside the door. Kai Chi came back in not long after she left. She puffed up her cheeks and said to Arbor, That manservant from the Mu family is really a strange person. I made it clear to him according to the Crown Princess's instructions, but he still didn't want to leave. He said that he will wait until tomorrow to lead the way for the Crown Princess. Arbor couldn't help but sneer. How much did Mu Jingfeng want her to return to the Mu family? She had already agreed to return, but he was still worried and insisted on leaving a manservant at the door as a decoration. It was simply baffling. Arbor had already made up her mind to return to the Mu family to rob them tomorrow. Since they invited her again and again with great enthusiasm, how could she not go? On the other side, Third Fu and Village Chief Wang were discussing how to break out of the zombie nest tomorrow. Village Chief Wang, gather the old, weak, women, children, and injured people in the village first. Prince Mo had many storage talismans, but most of them were filled with food, water, medicine, swords, armor, and so on. The remaining space should be enough to store a few hundred old, weak, women, and children. These people didn't have much fighting power. If they were left outside, they would just be food for the zombies. It was better to store them so that they wouldn't cause trouble during the battle. As for those young adults, they naturally had to fight alongside the troops. However, Prince Mo wouldn't mistreat them. He asked Fu San to distribute the armor and weapons so that these people would have something to rely on. Young Master Fu. While Third Fu was discussing with the village chief, he saw the single-clothed Su and the little girl Mei Lan walking over from afar. Fu San glanced at her and nodded slightly with an indifferent expression. Alchemist Dan, food is being distributed here, so it's a little chaotic. You should go back to your tent and rest first. It's okay. Shan Yi-su smiled gently. I can help too. Third Fu frowned slightly and turned to look at Dark Current, Hui Feng, and the others who were currently distributing food. He said with an indifferent expression, we already have enough people to distribute food, so we don't dare to trouble Alchemist Dan. Young Master Fu, did I do something wrong? Shan Yi-su could not help but ask when she saw Third Fu's cold attitude towards her. Mei Lan, who was standing behind her, was so angry that her stomach was about to explode. These past few days had truly been sullen enough. Ever since she was given the cold shoulder at the Chiao residence that day, she felt that everything was very unpleasant. No matter who she met, no one gave her and her servant a good attitude. Even a few page boys dared to give her miss a hard time. The page boys that Mei Lan was referring to were Hui Feng, Dark Current, and the others. Third Fu smiled sardonically. Alchemist Dan came all the way here to help, so the entire army is very grateful. However, we won't trouble Alchemist Dan with the rough work of distributing food. Chapter 3562. Shan Yi-su frowned and wanted to say something, but when she looked up, she saw Mo Lien leading a group of people over from the sand wall. Her eyes couldn't help but light up, and she walked towards Prince Mo with small steps. However, the Crown Prince was surrounded by many people. Not only could she not get close, she was also, accidentally, pushed to the side. Mei Lan hurried forward to support her young miss. She glared angrily and used her elbow to, accidentally, push away her young Mrs. Undercurrent. Greetings to your highness the Crown Prince. Before Shan Yi-su could finish her sentence, she saw Crown Prince Mo walking past her while being escorted by people. He didn't even spare her a glance from the corner of his eye. Mei Lan helped her young miss up. Her heart and lungs were about to explode. Young miss, His Highness must have done it on purpose. How could he not see such a big living person standing here? Shan Yi-su bit her lip and sighed. Forget it, time will reveal a person's heart. He just doesn't understand me now. It should be better in a while. When Shan Yi-su said this, she also felt that she lacked confidence. In fact, since they met, she had seen Prince Mo a total of 3 times. Moreover, His Highness the Crown Prince had never spoken to her directly. However, the more it was like this, the more unconvinced Shan Yi-su felt. She had traveled through the 3 states in the past and had never seen a prince or imperial grandson who didn't take her seriously like this. Take His Highness the Crown Prince of Tsangzhou, Rong Li, for example. Didn't he prostrate himself at her feet and hate that he couldn't spend time with her? It was just that she didn't like that person. Shan Yi-su bit her lip and looked at Mo Lien's departing figure with a complicated expression. She didn't say anything for a long time. Young miss, why do we have to rush to see other people's cold faces? The little girl Mei Lan said angrily, the 3 states are so big. Who isn't obedient and respectful to young miss? There's no need to suffer this. Putting aside His Highness the Crown Prince who was obsessed with alchemists in Tsangzhou, who dared to treat alchemists like this in the surrounding small countries and tribes. Not all of them were alchemists and alchemists, rushing to befriend their young miss. As long as Miss casually took out a spirit-breaking pill, those who would rush to do her bidding could line up from Dragon Flame City to the Sea of Forgetfulness. This Crown Prince of the Divine Land was really insensible. Shan Yi-su's eyes flashed faintly. Ever since she was young, her personality had always been like this. She would never do anything that was not for the best. The path to becoming an alchemist was like this, and the pursuit of a lifetime of happiness was also like this. With her status, she could find any man she wanted. But if she didn't like it personally, she naturally wouldn't want it. Speaking of which, she had only heard of the Crown Prince of the Divine Land in the beginning. Who would have thought that he would helplessly fall into her trap the first time they met? The Crown Prince of Shenzhou was superior in both appearance and ability. Compared to others, the one from Tsangzhou was no different from the mud under one's shoe. Shan Yi-su was a very persistent person. Since she was young, as long as she set her mind on something, she would definitely do it. It was the same for the person he had chosen. If she set her mind on it, it would be hers. No matter how many hardships there would be in the future, she believed that she would achieve her wish one day. With this kind of confidence, Shan Yi-su returned to his tent. After the discussion, everyone decided to go to bed early. After all, there was still a good battle to fight tomorrow. Chapter 3563. The next morning, when the sky was just beginning to brighten, the army had already set out early in the morning. Back then, Mo Lien and the others had found a small opening and charged into the village from the place with the fewest zombies. After investigating, they found that the periphery was completely blocked off by zombies. They still needed to expend a bit of effort to break out from the inside. Mo Lien and Fu Sanbing split into two groups, each leading half of the army. Using firearms to clear the way, they charged out of the zombie nest like two sharp blades. Shan Yi-su wanted to rush to Mo Lien's side several times, but she was always obstructed. She couldn't help but feel a bit stifled. Shan Yi-su's cultivation wasn't high, and she could only be considered an ordinary person on the divine province. At the age of 28, she was currently at the 4th level of the spiritual realm, and her fire spirit had only reached the 5th level of the spiritual fire. Of course, although Shan Yi-su's cultivation was low, no one would look down on her because of this. After all, she was a pill master, and most of her time was spent on the path of pill Dao. Your Highness. Hui Feng leaped to Mo Lien's side and whispered to her, "There seems to be something strange about this Shan Yi-su." And Lu glanced back and nodded. "That's right, Your Highness. Look, there are so many zombies around her, but not a single one of them attacked her." Mo Lien, however, looked as if she was used to this. What do you think she relied on to escape from the zombie nest before? Of course it's the pills on her. Mo Lien said aloofly. She probably concocted a type of medicine that can temporarily conceal all of her aura. The zombies couldn't sense her, so they naturally wouldn't attack her. Hui Feng nodded pensively. Then this Shan Yi-su is someone with some ability. She's a god-rank pill master. Mo Lien swept an indifferent glance over. Of course she has some ability. As they spoke, they had already led the soldiers to clear a path through the zombie horde and charged out of the sand wall. This place was surrounded by sand, and when they fought, sand and dust would roll endlessly. Fortunately, they had wrapped their noses and mouths with pieces of cloth in advance. Fighting against the corpse puppets in the sandstorm, the group moved quickly and nimbly. Wherever the soldiers swung their swords, the heads of the corpse puppets rolled off. Team 1, take a break. Team 2, take over. The troops advanced and retreated in an orderly manner. 1,000 people replaced the previous soldiers and began a new round of killing. Just like that, the group quickly advanced forward. Mo Lien suddenly paused the long sword in his hand and turned around to take a look. In the midst of a gust of wind, sand spread out endlessly, like a roaring giant beast, swallowing everyone in an instant. The sudden gust of wind messed up the team. But soon, everyone adjusted their pace and tried their best to coordinate with each other. These elite troops were obviously veterans of the battlefield. It was also very easy to deal with the corpse puppets. Mo Lien narrowed her eyes. Previously, he had also considered whether to use the large catapults to deal with these densely packed zombies. But this idea was ultimately rejected by him and Third Fu. For one, the large catapults were very cumbersome. Although they could knock down quite a few zombies with one strike of the hammer, they were still very useful. But everyone knew that merely injuring the limbs of the zombies wasn't of much use. Chapter 3564. In a battle of manpower, they could naturally dispose of these ugly fellows quickly, ruthlessly, and accurately. Team 2 rest. Team 3 take over. Following Huifeng's words, the teams moved again. They rapidly advanced toward the periphery. 2 hours later, they opened a gap in the zombie nest and encountered Fu San, who was leading his troops from the side. The two teams became increasingly invincible when they worked together. If one were to observe from above, they would discover that these two teams were in the shape of a scissor, like two sharp longswords that stabbed into the center of the zombie nest. Mo Lien suddenly soared into the air. Facing the fierce sandstorm, she flew directly above the place where the numerous zombies were gathered. He coldly glanced at the group of zombies below. With a flick of his sleeve, countless pitch-black flames silently burned among the group of corpses. Every zombie that came into contact with the black flames roared and rolled on the ground. As a result, the speed at which the black flames spread and infected the zombies became even faster. The soldiers, who were already in low spirits, felt their spirits lift slightly when they saw this. The zombies before them blotted out the sky and covered the earth. They had already killed until their hands were sore, but now that they saw their prince's incomparable bravery, their confidence instantly multiplied. The teams took turns to replace each other, and the elite soldiers with high cultivation were arranged to be in the later teams. When it was their turn, the field was filled with alternating red and blue colors. Brilliant red fire spirits danced in everyone's hands, occasionally stabbing into the zombie horde with icicles. Seeing that the situation was basically under control, Mo Lien handed a storage talisman containing the elderly, the weak, women, and children to Fu San and had him lead a portion of the physically exhausted people to retreat first. "Your Highness, you must be careful. There are several high-level zombies in the zombie horde, and they've already scratched and injured many people," Fu San exhorted before leaving with his men. Mo Lien glanced at Wang Dongping, who was currently helping the injured with a group of physicians. However, she saw that his face already revealed extreme exhaustion. It appeared that he had expended too much of his medicinal effects. "Send the injured and the physicians out first." Mo Lien turned to glance at Hui Feng before instructing, "Send someone to watch Wang Dongping and his sister." Hui Feng immediately led people to move the wounded. Mo Lien watched as more than half of the zombies were eliminated. Suddenly, she released more than 100 mechanical puppets. Retreat. After 6 hours of fighting, the soldiers were all exhausted. They needed to replenish their energy in a timely manner. There were less than 3,000 corpse puppets left, so they were not a threat at all. After they rested for a while, it was not impossible for them to come back and finish the work. After the bugle horn sounded, all the soldiers retreated in an orderly manner like a tide. One team after another, they headed out of the desert. After retreating more than 10 miles away from Greyfield Village, the sandstorm gradually subsided. Just as everyone was heaving a sigh of relief, more than a dozen earth tornadoes suddenly appeared in the sky and chased after the troops. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw this. "Your Highness, retreat." Mo Lien waved her hand coldly. He could tell that they might have fallen into an earth spiritual formation. An expert must have set up a talisman formation here. That was probably the reason why the village was buried by the sand in an instant. However, it was already too late for him to realize this. Someone had already activated the Earth Spiritual Formation's second attack. Chapter 3565. More than a dozen earth tornadoes chased after them and were already right in front of them, about to engulf everyone. Mo Lien's eyes flickered, and she swiftly flung out a mirror from her sleeve. That mirror expanded with the wind and rapidly grew. It instantly blotted out the sky and blocked out the sun in front of everyone. Bam! An earth tornado pounced forward, blocking the mirror outside. Everyone's eyes widened in shock as they stared at the mirror above their heads. Could this be a defensive divine weapon? While everyone was pondering this, they saw the earth tornado pounce toward the mirror again. Boom! 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 3 to 6 earth tornadoes rammed into the mirror. Mo Lien turned to instruct the dazed Hui Feng. "Everyone, retreat. Retreat 50 kilometers away first." Hui Feng quickly nodded and ordered his subordinates to lead the soldiers away. He and the 100-odd purple forest guards all stayed behind and stood next to His Highness the Crown Prince. "Why aren't you leaving yet?" Mo Lien frowned and turned to glare at Hui Feng. "Don't you know our capabilities? Hurry and scram with them. Don't make our eyes irritated." Mo Lien irritably roared at Hui Feng. Hui Feng and the youths of the Purple Forest Guard shook their heads in unison. What a joke! They definitely wouldn't leave. If His Highness was here, then they were here. If His Highness wasn't here, then there was no need for them to exist. Mo Lien glanced at Hui Feng and the others in displeasure, but she didn't have time to be long-winded with them. She flicked her sleeve again, and several similar mirrors darted out from her sleeve and flew straight into the sky. At the same time, the first mirror abruptly shattered. While everyone was still in a daze, the second, third, and fourth mirrors flew to the same position and blocked the Earth tornado's path. That Earth tornado was probably a bit stuffy from being blocked the entire time, so it frantically spun wave after wave and pounced on the mirrors. Once, twice, thrice, and countless times, it shattered no less than 5 mirrors before finally crashing into Mo Lien's defensive barrier. Hui Feng led a group of purple forest guards to lend a helping hand, helping Crown Prince Mo erect a defensive boundary together and reducing the pressure on him. At the same time, a middle-aged man in gray robes, who was sitting in the center of the sandstorm, opened his eyes and revealed 2 large yellow teeth. He coldly said, "Brat, I'll end your life here today. You dared to ruin our plans time and time again. This time, you'll definitely die in this sandstorm." He had set up this earth formation with great difficulty. Originally, it was only to raise the zombies underground as a defensive formation. However, as the experiments continued, more than half of the corpse puppets were destroyed by the heavenly Tao during an earthquake. Thus, he shifted his attention to the nearby villages. With so many ready-made corpse puppets that he could cultivate, why wouldn't he do it? New grudges and old grudges, I'll properly settle them with you, brat. A shrewd glint appeared in the middle-aged man's eyes. He suddenly clapped his hands together, and a jade talisman jumped out of his fingertips. As the jade talisman fused with the formation plate beneath his feet, the earth tornadoes that were originally howling outside the defensive barrier gathered together like a gathering of demons and ghosts. One after another, the earth tornadoes suddenly formed an enormous upside-down funnel-shaped tornado. It was at least 100 times larger than the previous earth tornado. Chapter 3566. This enormous tornado violently swept towards the purple forest guards with earth-shaking power. Boom! The purple forest guards who bore the brunt of the attack immediately spat out mouthfuls of blood as their bodies flew outwards. There had only been a thin layer of sand beneath their feet, but now, with the pervasive sandstorm, it grew thicker and thicker. The barren sand had already spread to their calves and was spreading towards their knees. Boom! The tornado crashed into the group's defensive boundary again, and this time, even more purple forest guards were sent flying. Under the impact of the power of heaven and earth, no one could confidently say that they would be able to withstand it. Mo Lien's eyes narrowed slightly. When the tornado crashed towards them again, she signaled with her eyes, and Hui Feng and the others immediately understood. At the same time, they withdrew the defensive boundary with Mo Lien. The tornado arrived with a howl, filling the air with sandstorm and swallowing all of them in one gulp. From afar, it looked like an enormous skull had swallowed Mo Lien, Hui Feng, and the others into its gaping maw. The gray-robed middle-aged man who'd been meditating in the earth spirit formation suddenly opened his eyes and laughed maniacally. Good, good, good. He'd finally taken care of this brat who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and opposed their organization at every turn. If this brat knew that he died at Chu Chengfei's hands, who knew what he'd think? The gray-robed middle-aged man smiled smugly. "Senior brother Black Cat, I've avenged you." At the same time, Mo Lien and the others, whose bodies seemed to have been bitten off by the skull's gaping maw, still didn't show themselves in the thick dust. Single-clothed Su's sleeve was pulled by the little girl beside him. At this time, he was looking at the scene in front of him with an ashen face. No way, His Highness the Crown Prince died just like that? Would the person she took a fancy to die so easily? Miss, let's hurry and leave. The tornado might still be digesting after swallowing them. If it digests any later, it might come for us. The girl, Mei Lan, glanced mysteriously at the tornado that was spinning in place and felt her entire body tremble. She couldn't have been right, could she? Just now, this tornado seemed to have looked at her very spiritually. Shan Yi Su took a deep breath, nodded, and was about to leave. Suddenly, a few pitch-black leaves drilled out of the gale. What was that? Shan Yi Su stopped and looked back with a puzzled expression. This time, she could see clearly, only to see a few roots suddenly springing out from under a few leaves. Immediately after, the roots grew like a towering tree. The longer it grew, the taller it grew, the tighter it became. A main branch, like a giant tree and a wide vine, suddenly drilled out of the cloud of sand, suddenly bursting all the sand around it. A giant ink-colored lotus flower that could seize the good fortune of heaven and earth appeared before the eyes of single-clothed Sue and her maid. The two of them looked at everything in front of them in shock. Their little mouths were slightly agape, as if they didn't know what to say. Over 100 purple forest guards were hanging from the main branch of the black lotus, and they were all looking down with dumbfounded expressions. They were 100 meters above the ground. At this moment, they looked at each other in dismay and then looked up. They saw His Highness standing in the middle of a half-open black lotus flower. His long hair was scattered in the wind, and his handsome face was expressionlessly looking at them. Chapter 3567. What did you see? For some reason, the purple forest guards all felt that His Highness's voice seemed to be suffused with a thick chill. They all shook their heads with a strong desire to live and said in unison, "This subordinate swears." This subordinate didn't see anything. Could they say that His Highness stood on a flower bud and was extraordinarily handsome, comparable to a flower? They obviously couldn't. If they wanted to live, they had to be smarter and learn how to keep their mouths shut. It would be best if they could be both blind and mute. Emolien glanced at them. With a flick of her sleeve, she swooped down from 100 meters in the air and landed firmly on her feet. When the purple forest guards saw this, they all jumped down in unison with His Highness. Hui Feng chuckled mischievously. When he saw Prince Emo turn to look at him, he awkwardly rubbed his nose. In reality, he didn't want to laugh. He just subconsciously chuckled. Oh no, would His Highness think that he was laughing at him? Hui Feng, didn't your Majesty say in your last letter that our wife bought an estate on Mount Heaven Saint? Take some people with you to dig it up later. What? Hui Feng wanted to cry but had no tears. He glanced at His Highness. Just how much of a person did this lord like to seek revenge for the smallest grievance? Your Highness, this subordinate swears that I definitely wasn't laughing at your beauty earlier. After Hui Feng finished speaking, he suddenly discovered that the air had quieted down. He stiffly turned his head and saw that the purple forest guards were all looking at him like he was a corpse. He instantly wanted to cry but had no tears. 3 months. Emolien tossed down this icily before ignoring our dear Hui Feng with a bitter expression. With a wave of his hand, the enormous ink-colored lotus flower that pierced the sky and earth slowly shrunk until it was the size of a small flower and directly disappeared between his brows. Emolien turned to look ahead and summoned 7th Yen with an icy gaze. Her finger moved slightly forward. Over there. 7th Yen whistled, and the golden dragon swept Emolien up with a sweep of its tail. The human and dragon traveled against the wind, and it was as if countless raging wind ghosts were brushing past them. However, to them, it didn't affect them at all. Emolien waved her hand and a sword appeared in her hand. A thick sword intent instantly flew out from the sword, creating a buzzing sound as it rubbed against the violent wind. Like a primordial force that tore apart the heavens and earth, this perfectly straight sword intent slashed towards the center of the zombie horde with an invisible force that could destroy heaven and earth. The sound of a sudden explosion rang out among the group of corpse puppets. Chu Qingfei, who was sitting in the middle of the Earth Spirit formation, was shocked. He couldn't escape in time and was hit on the back by a sword intent. His physical body instantly disintegrated, while his soul attached itself to a blood-stained jade talisman and suddenly burrowed into the ground with a squeak. Emolien seemed to sense something and looked down. However, at this moment, the thick dust was billowing, making it impossible to clearly see what was inside the destroyed Earth spiritual array disk in the center of the zombie horde. However, Yen Qi sensed something very keenly. Master, the array disk has been broken, but the person in the array disk has escaped. His body has died and his soul has escaped. Emolien nodded with an indifferent expression. Suddenly, as if he had sensed something, he looked down. Sand and pebbles flew up under her feet, and all the earth and stones seemed to be sucked into the broken array disk, accompanied by waves of roaring corpse puppets. The earth trembled. The Earth's spiritual array disk began to disintegrate, sucking in everything nearby. Chapter 3568. Emolien's expression changed. He was currently standing above the damaged formation disk, so he was naturally at the center of this sandstorm. Hence, he promptly recalled 7th Yen, but he was already uncontrollably sucked into the center of the formation disk. Hui Feng and the others naturally turned pale with fright. However, they were still quite a distance away from the center of the formation disk, so by the time they rushed over, they saw that His Highness the Crown Prince had already disappeared from the center of the broken formation disk. Even the corpse puppets in the vicinity were all swept away. Your Highness! Everyone's expressions changed drastically. My Qiao's section break. When Arbor finished drawing the last batch of jade talismans on Fish Orchid Planet, she discovered that it was already close to noon. Kai Xiu pushed open the door and entered before bowing to her. The carriage is ready. Crown Princess, shall we set off now? Arbor nodded, a cold smile flitting across her lips. How is the page boy outside? Kai Chi, who had followed her in, covered her mouth and giggled. He's about to peel off a layer of skin from the sun. He's showing signs of getting heatstroke, so someone helped him to the side to rest. How loyal and devoted. Arbor shook her head expressionlessly and got up to walk out the door. She had already explained the situation to her parents yesterday, so she didn't go to bid farewell today. In any case, she didn't need to stay in the Mu residence for long. She would leave after getting what she deserved from Morning Sun Pavilion. Now, she was increasingly hostile toward the Mu family, and she didn't have any favorable impression of them at all. She kept feeling that everyone in the Mu family, from top to bottom, was adept at scheming and wore a mask to conduct themselves. Just like that seemingly benevolent old lady. How could she abandon a granddaughter she had been with for so many years just like that? Arbor got into the carriage and sat there by herself, shaking her head slightly as if she had thought of something. The carriage drove out of Changle Avenue and headed toward Winter Moon Mountain Forest in the west. People came and went along the way, and the streets and alleys were filled with the cries of peddlers. Arbor had spent 6 days and 6 nights drawing talismans on Fish Orchid Planet. He had basically finished drawing all the blank talismans that he could draw. In the end, she seemed to have arrived at the Great Vacuum Realm. In the end, she seemed to have gathered the power of heaven and earth and drawn a Saint-grade golden talisman with the help of the gods. This was a Saint-grade golden talisman summoning talisman. This was the first time she had successfully drawn a Saint-grade golden talisman in her entire life. At that time, she had decisively put away the sacred grade golden talisman and stepped out of the Fish Orchid Planet. As expected, she had attracted a bolt of lightning. And it was still a small lightning strike. The lightning flashed and the thunder rumbled. It looked ferocious and lasted for a long time in the sky. However, when it came down to strike her, it seemed to be very weak. Speaking of which, she seemed to have gone crazy yesterday. She had drawn so many talismans and only rested for less than 4 hours. Now, she seemed to be a little drowsy. Xiao Mu simply took a thin blanket and lay down to sleep for a while. When the carriage stopped in front of the Mu family's house, they suddenly heard a clang. An arrow with the word Lin carved on the tail of the arrow happened to be stuck in the window of Arbor's carriage. The tail of the arrow trembled slightly. This sound naturally woke up the little crown princess who was sleeping soundly. She raised her head, and her eyes instantly became clear. A pair of fierce eyes suddenly shot out through the curtain of the window. Who dares to disturb the crown princess? Kai Xiu scolded and jumped out of the carriage. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.